Hello and welcome to Boss Door, the final threshold beyond which games must face their final and toughest opponent, the critical gaming public. My name's Ross and I'm here with my co-host.
I'm Joey.
No, I thought he was going to say it like a Pokemon.
And you just told me not to.
And today we're going to be talking about not a video game. We're actually going to be discussing a particular trend in the industry that I like to call release now and update later mentality that we see a lot throughout the entire industry. So I think it's an interesting topic to discuss what it means for the future of games and the root causes of it. And I think between those two things, it gives a good sort of state of the industry idea. A good starting place for where our mentality is when we talk about these games.
I think there should be a market, and that's kind of how we like to look at games, is as finished works of art.
Another system, another Skyrim, as they say.
You don't get these paradigm shifters anymore, because when they look at the paradigm, they're like, well, how can we make 14 of these?
It's fun for a little bit, and then you put it down, and then later you come back, and it's just as fun as it was.
Yeah.
Because it uses the space it takes up is exactly the space it needs to be what it wants to be.
That's my favorite formula. Release now, do not update.
Never change.
Yeah, I'm personally a little biased because I tend to play a lot of retro games, which they did not update those because that was not allowed yet.
Yeah, true. Well, that's not exactly true because there were other versions of even like Nintendo.
Yeah,
like,
there's remakes and remasters and
I'm
ports.
saying even for N64 carts, sometimes they would release multiple versions of it if there was like something truly game breaking.
Oh, really?
In the original cart, yeah, it's like okay, there's a massive glitch that makes the cart that we shipped like unplayable, or it completely breaks the game or something. They would sometimes make another one that didn't have that glitch.
I'm pretty sure my Donkey Kong 64 was just unplayable because the game was bad.
Yeah, that is DK64. I think this happened in Perfect Dark, if I recall. There's
that's like my favorite. That's one of my favorite Super games.
But there's at least two versions of that game.
Yeah, but I'm also a pre-64 fan. I like a lot of Super Nintendo stuff.
That's true. They didn't even
PlayStation 1.
They didn't even fucking playtest those games. They just put them out.
Yeah,
you know.
So one thing I want to talk about, which is definitely not our main point of this, but it's something we talk about a lot about offline that I think is interesting, is games as a work of art. Not all games are a work of art, and that's always their intention, not just trying to say bad games aren't a work of art.
Yeah, like Mario Party exists.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's cool stuff, there's polish in that game, but it's not, it's not trying to make like Shadow of the Colossus.
Yeah, or Fortnite.
Yeah.
Woo.
But, most art doesn't change over time. And the stuff that does pisses all of us off. The original trilogy of Star Wars. So it's weird to go back to a game and it be different. Now, obviously, we've always had remasters. We've had, like, remakes and stuff. But sometimes stuff that worked on day one just doesn't work on day 18. And sometimes you like the stuff that works on day one. And there are ways to get the patch you want or whatever. But that's not really... That's just not how I experience most art.
Yeah.
I'm not like, ooh, what stage of the Van Gogh painting are we at?
Exactly. But what's interesting about games is like, they're a medium, created from computer code, which is inherently mutable, right? They're the only art we have that's really mutable. Like once you, even with movies and stuff, like once you film a film, it's filmed, You could film it again in a different way, but that's a different thing.
Yeah.
But in games, you can just go in. You can just change it. You can just be like, this asset's not there anymore. These glitches aren't there anymore. This whole level is different, right? Look at like Dark Souls 2. They came out with the DLC that became a definitive edition for the entire game.
Yeah.
Right? The original Dark Souls 2, I don't even know how to play anymore. Like, I don't know where you even get that. It's only Scholar of the First Sin, which was just a DLC that released like a year after. So
I just picked up an original version of Dark Souls 2.
Oh, that's where you get it. It's at Joey's house. Nowhere else.
Yeah, never gonna play this version. It's called the Black Armor Edition.
Yeah, it's probably not even the first one.
Yeah. But I was gonna bring up a game too, because I want to fit in. So they didn't, patch this game, but they made a remake of Majora's Mask.
Yeah.
For the DS. And I think it, actually ruins the game. Like, the things they changed, to me, changes the core experience. And yeah, I mean, I can go back and play the 64 Majora's Mask, that stuff's out there. But as we get further and further down the timeline of games, this stuff is going to be less available to people.
Right.
Because all the games are going to be owned digitally. So you're just going to download that game and maybe they make changes for the worse, maybe they make changes for the better, but you never see what the day one vision was. And so it kind of makes discussing games hard sometimes. Like, I've been listening to a lot of, podcasts talking about, we've been doing the Dark Souls, preparing for the future months. And sometimes people talk about day one Dark Souls 2 stuff, and it's just not the same experience I had.
Yeah.
And it's hard to tell, like, did they have trouble with this, or did this used to be harder? Crap like that.
Exactly. And it's like the Demon Souls remake is an incredibly faithful PS5 remake of, what was it, a PS2, PS3 game?
PS3 game.
It was an incredibly faithful remake of a PS3 game that was janky and weird. And they especially kept in the jank. They're like, yeah, Flame Lurker is a janky boss. We made him janky still. Because we wanted that exact feeling of the original game. But this was also an opportunity to, like, make the game better. Everybody's like, oh, are they going to make the last Archstone, the broken Archstone? Are they going to make the Realm of the Giants that we go do? And they're like, no, we're not doing that. That's not in the game. That wasn't Miyazaki's vision. And it's easy enough to talk about some games like the Souls series or Metal Gear, where they have kind of a single director making a particular vision of a game.
Yeah.
But it's much harder when you get to anything else, really. But, like, you start talking about massively multiplayer games and stuff like that. It's like, what does it mean to be an artistic vision of, like, Fortnite, a game that changes constantly?
Yeah.
A game that's built on being something different every month.
Yeah, or there's stuff like, man, I had a really fun build I had in, like, League of Legends.
Yeah.
I had a thing I liked doing, and all of those items just don't exist anymore. In that version of the game that you had fun with, you might have fun in the new version, but you might not. Like, entire experiences can be deleted.
Yes.
And there's value to that sometimes. Sometimes you might like something that's broken, but also sometimes it's fun to do broken shit in video games.
Exactly.
Right?
So there's a game I've been playing called Unsighted, which is this sort of top-down Metroidvania, kind of a Souls-like. It has a lot of Souls mechanics, but it's not thematically like a Souls game at all. That game is designed to be broken for speedrunning purposes. There's no proper way to go through the areas. And it even has mechanics like you can lift boxes and you can stack them, and you can just, like, make a staircase over a wall. You can just do that if you have the resources and the ingenuity. And it's designed for that, But then you look at something like Hollow Knight that we've talked about before. You can break that game, and on some patches you could break it more, because on 1.2.2.1, you could hit levers through doors. So you could open doors from the wrong way. But sometimes you open the door from the wrong way, and the room that you're going into stays dark. Like, normally you go into a room and it lights up. Instead, you enter the room wrong. It stays dark. Now you're doing a dark room, and you can't see what you're doing. Shit like that. You can soft lock yourself. You can spawn bosses from the wrong direction and they don't act right. But that game is like, we've talked about how open and interesting that game was, but even that game wasn't purely designed to come at from any direction. And so they patched that stuff out, but speedrunners still run on 1.2.2.1, at least for some categories, like major glitches and stuff, right? Any percent NMG, because it's faster, but there's always like, it's interesting because it is more fun too, to be able to do things in the wrong order, to feel like you're circumventing the direction, because there's this clash between, like, the director's vision and the player's will.
There's two things that kind of makes me want to talk about. One, I actually really do see a lot of value in techniques for, like, people like speedrunners and stuff, even though that's not most of the player base. A decent amount of player base watches speedruns.
Yeah.
Maybe that's still, like, a small enough number, but a lot of times when I really like a game, I just go on, I'm like, well, let me see someone bullshit it. Like, what does the bullshit version of this game looks like? And I get that the developers can want to make an experience that is fair for everyone. But one game I had Ross step into was a DS remake of Fire Emblem 2. And one of the big complaints the remake has is everything they fixed was the broken stuff.
Yeah.
And the broken stuff was actually the fun thing to do, because the game is kind of inherently unfair in a somewhat unfun way, but it's fun to do builds or whatever you want to call it, where you just do dumb bullshit.
Yeah.
And, like, sometimes the dumb bullshit's fun. Like, it's a game made for the NES. And I get you don't want to make the game broken, but, like, also that's not always a bad thing.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's fun. Like, the developers are trying to make a game that you can't trivialize, and then you learn to trivialize it through the collective, work of all of the players in the world. And that's fine to me.
Yeah.
You know, because the person playing Fire Emblem 15 the first time, it's not going to trivialize it, right? It's someone who's played it 85 times. And maybe it's someone, not actually 85 times, but someone who's played it a lot. And if you play something a lot and you learn to, you know, find techniques, or you go online and find techniques, that's fine to me.
Yeah. You know, games are generally meant to be replayed, right? So, like, the more power you can give to the player, the more they're going to play that game. Like, the more time they're going to spend with it, and the more energy they're going to dedicate towards it. And that's an important thing, right? Like, you're never going to be able to obviously please everybody, but it's important to know who your target audience is and how to engage with that audience.
Yeah, and so, you know, this is mostly, right now, talking about PvE, but even for PvP, I would say. So I play, not a lot, but I play some League of Legends. I've already referenced it once. So you could figure that out, audience. But the one thing they clearly do whenever new champions come out is they make them broken at first and then they patch them down later, right? And they kind of keep nerfing older characters and keep making sure the newer characters are more powerful, so you're playing with more new characters and you're incentivized to, you know, buy the more expensive characters or whatever. And, you know, in a way that's okay, because you're, you know, hey, look at the new champion, see the new stuff we can do. But if you like a character from season 1 of League, it's just going to get worse every year.
Yeah.
You know, you know, there's several characters that I used to remember, like, oh man, this person used to be good, and they're just terrible now.
Yeah.
And they're never going to be good again, probably. And, you know, again, it's a PvP game. You need to evolve that more to keep it fresh. But, like, you're kind of killing champions in a way for certain players.
Well, any game, I think, that has that sort of iterative process is going to suffer from, you know, power creep, where things just kind of get more powerful all the time. We see it in League of Legends. It was really the downfall of Overwatch. I know that's been happening for a long time, like Magic the Gathering, you know, the card game. That's just a problem.
And power creep exists to sell stuff.
Yeah.
Right? As someone who's played a lot of Magic, that's the big reason they have power creep, is they're trying to sell packs.
Yeah.
So if you have this card you have to have, people will buy more packs. Whenever they used to do a consistent power decreep, those sets sold like shit. So they stopped doing it.
Yeah.
And so now we're just going up and up and up and up and up and up and up. And, you know, not every developer knows when they're making something broken or not, right? You know, it's hard to tune everything before it comes out.
Yeah, but at the same time, like, this is a problem that we also see across entire series, you know? Like, if you look at the Soul series, you know, something we've been playing a lot, some of the easiest bosses in Dark Souls 3 are harder than some of the hardest bosses in, like, Demon Souls.
Yeah.
You know? Like, the final boss of Demon Souls, King Allant, is kind of a joke. Like, when you're a Souls veteran and you're like, oh, he's just like a duel, you just fight him, he's got a sword and you fight him, holy shit, that fight is easy.
And the consensus is the third hardest boss in Demon Souls.
Exactly, because most of them are kind of garbage. But over time, power creep has occurred. And by Dark Souls 3, you've got your
the third hardest boss is Pontiff of Sullivan.
By Dark Souls 3, you've got your dual great swords, and you're doing, you know, spinning, fanning attacks that stun lock enemies. And it's like, yeah, you didn't have that in Demon Souls.
Yeah.
Right? Because, like,
or more importantly, you didn't have to learn to dodge correctly in Demon Souls quite as well as you had to learn in later games.
So, all this to say, you know, games are often an iterative process. They don't exist in one form. They don't exist in a singular vision. So we kind of want to talk about, like, in a way, what it means to be like a definitive game, right? Because we can't say, okay, this is the game until, you know, maybe many years after it's done updating and things like that. But we can point out to multiple occasions where we're like, this is not a game, right?
Yeah. One thing I want to talk about kind of a lot in this is the way marketing has affected this to a great degree.
Yeah.
So a game I love to use as an example, and I'm not trying to make a definitive statement on how you should feel about this game, but I'm going to lay out what I view the history of the release of this game. So there was a game that could not have been more hyped. No Man's Sky. Like most of the games that have like tons of marketing traction, they kind of promise too much.
Yeah.
You know, they're like, okay, it's going to be it will feel like a galaxy's at your fingertips and you can go into any planet. They're not going to be as empty as Fallout 76. No, you can go anywhere. And everyone was hyped as fuck for that game. Then it came out, and then there was a huge backlash, and everyone was kind of upset. And then the people who were hyping the game, who were on social media all the time, just fell off the face of the earth and stopped talking about the game for a bit.
Yeah.
Right? I have not played No Man's Sky, but from listening to people who do play it and a bunch of different people I know and people I don't really know, the game is in a good place now. Eventually we got to the point where that game is actually fun. And they released a game that maybe wasn't everything they promised, but is, a good and exciting game, right? Yeah. Now, I think No Man's Sky is different from another game we're going to talk about, Cyberpunk, because No Man's Sky isn't the world's biggest studio.
Yeah.
And there's a level of, okay, we can't finish this game with the money that we have.
Yeah.
It's too ambitious. But if we get all these pre-orders, we can finish the game. But it required them to kind of lie to the customer, and eventually a good product came out, but also at least half the people are never going to experience that product who bought that game.
Well, that is something I do want to talk about. Like, we're going to talk about Steam and early access in part of this, but No Man's Sky is a really good example of what we're talking about here, because it did release in what most people would call an unfinished state, or at least a severe lack of content that was somewhat promised.
Small aside, most of the people who liked No Man's Sky at release were like, it's like Pokemon Snap. You just walk around and take cool pictures. Yeah. And that can be fun if you like that, but that is not fun for everyone.
Except Pokemon Snap has a great depth of content, Yes, the mechanic is taking pictures, but there's a lot of ways to take pictures. Whereas there is only one way to explore the galaxy in No Man's Sky, and it sucks.
No joke, I think the loudest I've ever yelled at a video game was Pokemon Snap, where my friend accidentally deleted the best Mew I've ever seen. Oh my God. And I was on the phone, and I was like, you have to come over and see Pokemon Snap. And I dropped the phone, he just hears me screaming. And he's like, did someone die? What's going on? Like, he deleted a Mew!
These are gunshots.
Yeah.
But No Man's Sky, a lot of people defended the original form of No Man's Sky, being like, oh, it's a treatise on like existential nihilism. Like, you just go out into the universe and there's nothing there,
Can you stop talking about Dark Souls? Because it just makes me want to talk about it.
But the point is, like, that's what the defenders of that game wanted to say. They're like, oh, I had, this particular experience. But it's like, that wasn't the promised experience. That arguably wasn't the intended experience. They just made a way to procedurally generate planets on a huge scale and didn't really do anything else with that. They gave you like some mining and some crafting abilities, and that's it. And that's like most of what you find on Steam Early Access these days is like survival crafting games,
Yeah.
No Man's Sky was just bigger because it was coming from not a big name publisher, but it was a well-hyped game, And then over the years, they've made these huge updates, transforming it into a massively multiplayer online game.
And from my understanding, fundamentally changing the gameplay loop.
When they started No Man's Sky, they were explicit. They were like, we do not want this to be a multiplayer experience, right? That wasn't their goal.
Yeah.
But the fans wanted it. The people that wanted to play No Man's Sky wanted it to be multiplayer. And so they added multiplayer, and then they expanded on multiplayer, and they added base building, and they added the ability for everybody else to see your base, and people are starting to build like cities and entire like galaxies of people coming together in multiplayer to play No Man's Sky together, to build things. You can go online and people have like, hey, if you go to this planet at this coordinates, you can find my farm, that you can use and shit like that. This game is fundamentally different from its original vision, but it is what the fans wanted. And whether you think it's good or bad, I poured hundreds of hours into this game, and I stopped a while ago.
Yeah, did you enjoy any of those hours?
I did. I mean, look, it's not the funnest game, all right? It's definitely a grindy game, but sometimes you want to grind,
To be fair, I just remember like once, like every like 4 months, you're like, oh man, No Man's Sky sucks. You're like, No Man's Sky's bad, but a little bit better. Like, it just was slowly like just dumping a couple more hours to see if it was good in a slowly changing.
Just a couple more hours. But I would check out like the major updates and stuff and see what No Man's Sky was about. And I kind of stopped doing that after a while. But even after the hundreds of hours that I've played that game is almost unrecognizable to me now.
Yeah.
With like the latest updates. That game has changed so much over the years that it even me who has played it so much doesn't even know what's going on anymore, And I don't know. I think that's interesting. Like, what does it mean to, like, what is No Man's Sky anymore? When is that game done? When do we have when can we talk about No Man's Sky as a singular game?
Yeah, as a product.
Yeah.
So me, again, commenting on Western games I don't really play because I'm biased. That's what I've heard a lot about Destiny. Whereas even the people who really like Destiny 1 were like, yeah, but it was after like mini updates. Or whatever, whatever significant update made that game kind of playable. I'm willing to forgive smaller companies a lot more. Like, I use No Man's Sky personally to make the argument that this is what some companies should do. I'm not quite sure if you describe them as indie. They're like the biggest indie you can get if they're indie, the people who made No Man's Sky.
Yeah.
Right? But they're not AAA. Right? They're not the names.
They had a lot of what we call AAA talent, like the head of the studio, I think came I forget what company he came from, but he was like a big name in like Square Enix or something, you know what I mean? And he basically went out and founded Hello Games.
So what I would say about the AAA though is talent isn't what defines it. Money's what defines it.
Yes. And
it's expensive to make games. And it's in one thing you mentioned a lot is, really where this budget is going to is towards marketing.
Yeah. If you look at any major AAA products budget, it's like 75% marketing. They're like, oh, how much do you spend on this game? $180 million. How much do you spend on marketing? $160 million.
Yeah.
It's sort of absurd. And I've been talking about this a lot on Twitter and stuff, but
at bossdoor4.
At bossdoor4.
Audience.
AAA is also more than just a budget, right? Like, when you talk about a AAA product, yes, you're talking about like a 9-figure budget, almost minimum. But it's a little bit more than that. Like, AAA is just kind of a club of these old studios that have been around for a long time. It's extremely hard for any new studio, no matter how big their budget is. Like, Devolver Digital just recently went public, and it was valued at like $1 billion, right? Bigger than most AAA studios.
Yeah.
Okay? Bigger than fucking Ubisoft, right? By a lot. Ubisoft is a few hundred million at best.
But isn't Devolver Digital just like all the indie games?
Yes, Devolver just publishes major indie hits.
It really feels like it's the masses grouping against the 1%, you know? Like, we can beat you if we completely band together.
Yeah, this is a PSA. No giant company is your friend, including Devolver. But Devolver cannot, From Software's not your friend, but Devolver cannot be considered a AAA company, right? It won't be, because it doesn't put out what we would consider AAA products, right? And AAA products have been reduced really to like serialized annual huge games, right? Games that just have the biggest fucking budget and, prioritize only graphics and shit like that, or are MMOs or something like that. Your Assassin's Creeds and shit like that. That's just a game way too big, designed just to sink a few hours into, and then, wait till next year to buy another one. That's what we consider AAA. Huge budgets from particular companies that most people can't break into.
I literally should have waited, but I said this right before we got on. It's the EA model. It's make every game like FIFA, right? Like, in my opinion, Assassin's Creed is like, we just put different skins on all these games, you know? Bethesda, right? Right? It's like, okay, we have the same core engine, and then we have two aesthetics, Fallout and, just fantasy. No twist.
Where was I going?
Derailed. From Software's my friend.
I didn't really...
I like how they're abusive to me.
Miyazaki tucks me in every day.
He does.
He needs to go home.
Yeah.
We're not doing the Blood War.
Yeah, we got to address it. One of the reasons I want to define the AAA and kind of focus on the differences between it and indie and the whole marketing thing is this is one of the causes of the problems that are with the update, or release now, update later.
Yeah.
A really good example is Cyberpunk, obviously.
Yeah.
So Cyberpunk was one of the most successful games in what games are trying to do. Make you pre-order it. And that's really the goal of these games, is to get you to pre-order it. It doesn't matter how good the game is. You spent the money and you're not getting that back, except for this time, people actually did, which was shocking with Cyberpunk. But that game was just not done. It was not done at all. I mean,
What?
it's very obviously not done. And it didn't work on a bunch of people's systems. People couldn't play it on the PS4. People were having trouble on the PS5 with it.
People were having trouble on their PCs.
Nice PCs.
Because the issues weren't, like, to be clear, the issues weren't a matter of
This is infinite.
computing power.
Yeah.
It wasn't just like, oh, you need the biggest, bestest computer, right? No, the game just didn't work. They released it in essentially like an alpha state. It was just broken. There was assets missing. You could literally walk around and see, placeholder assets. That's like put asset here. Like a sign that just says, put an asset here, right? Because they didn't finish the game.
Yeah, I watched my friend Justin play it on a really nice computer, and there was like an opening cutscene, and like someone was dying, but he could only hear it and not see it.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, it was just hysterical.
Here's the thing. I owned, let's see, at least 2 different versions of that game at launch. Okay? I originally bought it on the PS4, and I couldn't get past the first scene. Like I played about 5 minutes, and then my game glitched irrevocably, and I restarted several times and wasn't able to fix it. And then my friend, who really wanted to play, bought it for me on Steam and like gifted it to me, and then I tried to play it on Steam, and it still didn't fucking work. So now I refunded it on PS4, a legendary move, because you can't refund shit on PlayStation. They're literally like, if you've downloaded it, it's yours. You don't get to do it anymore. But they made an exception for Cyberpunk because it was so fucking bad. I refunded it on PS4, but I've still got that copy on Steam that I've just never touched again. And I've seen people like speedrun that game, and it's still a fucking mess. And they're talking about like releasing DLC and stuff, And I'm like, how did we? It really is what started this whole idea for this podcast. Like, how the fuck did we get here?
Yeah, it was preposterous, and like, so there's a couple of things about it. One, with the market, not just the fact that the marketing was overblown. And I've become such a skeptic where I just don't trust. If something is like, oh, it's going to be great. And I'm not just trying to be like, I don't like what's popular. It's just to be obvious, whenever a game's overhyped, it's always a disappointment.
Yeah.
This, No Man's Sky, Fallout 76, all this kind of stuff. Spore, you go that far back. They're always like, oh, your choices matter. We did this. And it's like, I don't believe you.
Yeah.
I'll wait till I see it. And a lot of people trusted Cyberpunk because they made Witcher 3. And everyone loves Witcher 3. I've not played it, but I'm sure it's a great game and probably an okay Netflix show. But like we said earlier, these developers are not your friend. Yeah. They're just going to try to make as much money as they possibly can. And the best way to do that is to trick all of you into pre-ordering it. Which leads to another problem, which everyone talks about in the gaming industry, crunch time. So much of this game was not just what they promised you, but when they promised you. And they kept delaying it, and the people were getting mad. And so they're like, we can't keep delaying it, so we'll just release garbage.
Yeah.
Unfunctional garbage. And now you overworked a bunch of people for no reason.
Yeah.
Right? They worked really hard on something that's not their fault that it's broken.
Yeah, it's not like the developers did that, It's the marketing team. It's the executives that make the decisions about release dates. And they're like, okay, it's going to release on this day. I hope it's done. And it wasn't. It was unfeasible for it to be done, but they didn't care.
Yeah.
They were just like, we're not going to delay it again, because they're the kind of people that think, I guess, that like if you just say something hard enough, if you just say it like with enough authority, it'll be true.
Yeah.
But that's not how
it's
works.
movie shit. It's like I'm a hacker. It's like, that'll take 4 hours. Like, you have 30 minutes. And they're like, I guess that works now.
Fuck, I can do it in 30 minutes, I guess. I don't know why I said
yeah. Like, if I was a person who owned a hacker, sorry. No. Bad wording.
Like they're animals.
Yeah. And I was like, they're like, I need 4 hours. And I said, do it in 30 minutes. And they did it. I'd fire them. Fucking lie to me.
Were you taking a 3.5 hour break?
Yeah, like, fuck off.
I went to lunch at the Red Lobster, and they were really busy.
They do not have good Wi-Fi.
I was working on my laptop, and I left my mouse at home, and it's a long drive.
It's like we're breaking into the Pentagon. Crunch time. So, and that's how a lot of these games work, though, is they're trying to get a hook. Like, this is the biggest world we've ever done. This is the most choices you can do. This is the highest graphics you can ever do to get people hooked into the game. But that doesn't necessarily make the game better. And all of those games, in my opinion, that promise these sorts of things, their day one state is garbage.
Yeah, it's always abysmal, right? Like we see this all the time in the AAA space, you know? And it's not true of like all games. Like I'm sure, you know, most Assassin's Creeds and shit that just reuse all their assets and barely build a new game. You know, like
that's a different problem.
Yeah,
that's a different sort of problem.
Like every Far Cry game releases essentially finished, but that's because they didn't make anything new, you know?
Yeah.
They're not out there crafting new assets. They're just like reusing the shit that they had and tweaking gameplay and stuff.
Yeah.
They're reselling the same game. And speaking of, I'm going to talk about Skyrim. Because Skyrim, I think, it's really the starting point of what I would call like the downfall of the AAA industry, right? Because Skyrim was a game that was sold exclusively on the promise, not exclusively. It was an Elder Scrolls game, and Morrowind and Oblivion were somewhat beloved games, right? Even Fallout 3 at the time, even though it's kind of a bad game, a lot of, you know, most people kind of loved it. So Skyrim had a lot of hype from its predecessors. But at the same time, one of the biggest promises Skyrim made was like, okay, we've got good graphics. I mean, they're not, but they were good for the time. And we have the biggest fucking world you've ever seen. It's so fucking big. It's 10 times bigger than Morrowind.
Yeah, you'd see stuff online where it's like, it would take, 100 days to walk across Sky. I mean, that's probably too much, but those sorts of
points. It was all kinds of shit like that. They would compare to other games' maps, which like, how do you do that?
Yeah.
But they would take maps from other games, and they're like, and then they superimpose it over a Skyrim map, and they're just like, look how fucking big Skyrim is, and you're like, yeah, cool. What are we gonna do with that space? Fill it with caves. Is there anything in those caves? No. Okay. Is this game gonna be good? No. Right?
Combat's not fun.
Yeah, it's a bad combat engine. It doesn't look good because like the game's so big they couldn't actually make it look very good. Like the graphics were okay, but it's mostly snow for a reason.
Like, what would you rather have? A steady stream of new content, or really good content for less amount of time?
Exactly. And Skyrim, like, it's a game that I understand why people like it because it's a real fuck around game. It's just like you can do whatever you want, but you can do whatever you want because that game is broken. Like fundamentally, down to its core, every bit of Skyrim is like not thought out, not well made, just broken. Even the enchanting system takes about 2 minutes to break and make you can like infinitely loop your enchantments with your alchemy. Like, you can drink a potion that makes your enchantments better, and then use your enchantments to make a potion that makes your enchantments better, and they loop onto themselves, so you just, pretty soon you drink a potion, and it's like, cool, your next enchantment is like 100 million times better. And you're like, okay, I'm an invincible monster now. That took all of 10 minutes, you know?
This also relates to something I want to talk a lot about, which is, I think these games work for a lot of people, because they're like a college kid who buys one game a year, and you can play Skyrim in like, you can get more hours out of Skyrim than you can get out of Metal Gear Solid 1.
Yeah.
But you get more quality hours out of Metal Gear Solid 1. And it's how you define your time. Like, maybe it's just nice to like play a game with your friends, have your headphones on, and just kind of, dirtle, right? Yeah. Just fuck around.
Do that all the time.
I would argue that there's better games to do that in. But also, I think there should be a market, and that's kind of how we like to look at games, is as finished works of art. As something that is intellectually stimulating, philosophically, gameplay-wise, and all that kind of stuff. The most interesting thing about Skyrim to me is it achieved the ultimate goal of these AAA industries, which is, I want to make one thing that I can keep using the same assets of, and keep making a steady stream of profit. Yeah. Like we said with Far Cry and Assassin's Creed. Except for Skyrim didn't even make new games. They just released Skyrim over and over again. And that worked. They could release this game on every system every year. And they haven't made a new Elder Scrolls since then.
No, and
that's insane.
And they're still releasing it. And here's the thing. Fallout 4, when I played Fallout 4, I was like, this is a reskinned Skyrim. Like, everything about it was just Skyrim, right? And it's because it's the same assets, like it literally is a reskin Skyrim. And then Fallout 76, the other utterly unfinished product that was released in the last few years, that just use Fallout 4 assets. Like, they haven't updated their engine, they haven't updated their asset library since probably like fucking Oblivion. You know, like, like
I mean, no joke. This is Bethesda's probably one of the richest companies in the world, and the only things, or video game companies.
Yeah.
I think Exxon got them. Skyrim came out in Obama's first term.
Yeah,
that's preposterous.
Skyrim was 2011. You know, we've been playing it for.
It's 11. Gonna be 11 years.
11 years.
Yeah, 2022 is like a week away.
I'm sure we'll get another one. Another system, another Skyrim, as they say.
Yeah, and the only game they've released since then, other than I guess Fallout 4, is fucking Fallout 76.
Yeah, but okay, so I want to just clarify why I'm talking about Skyrim, because I know this probably sounds a little rambly. The reason I mentioned Skyrim, the reason I talk about it, and honestly, like when I talk to my friends, if anybody asks me what's my least favorite game of all time, what I think the worst game of all time is, I always say Skyrim.
Detroit Become Human. Okay. Actually, it's Final Fantasy VII Remake.
It's maybe games we've covered recently, but like the truth is, to me, it's Skyrim, because Skyrim is the epitome of everything that's wrong with AAA gaming in general, and AAA gaming, whether we like it or not, tends to set standards for the gaming industry as a whole. You know, what works in AAA, we often see filtering down into, I don't want to say down, but we often see filtering into the indie space. And oftentimes what we see working well in the indie space does not get translated into the AAA space. You know?
Yeah, 100%. Like we talk about Metroidvanias a lot being super popular. They're only popular in the indie space.
Yeah.
There's not a modern Metroidvania that isn't Dark Souls 1.
Well, or that isn't Metroid. You know? Like they brought up Metroid Dread recently, and it's the first time we've actually seen a fucking Metroid game.
I saw a bunch of people online being like, man, this was like one of the best Metroidvanias. It's like, yeah, I hope so.
Fucking better.
Yeah.
I really do want to play Metroid Dread. I haven't played it yet, but I've only heard great things about it, which, I mean, of course I have, right?
Yeah.
But
it
does look like legitimately good.
Yeah.
Beyond
I think every 2D Metroid, other than the first one, but even the remake of one, it's great.
Yeah. But also Nintendo tends to put out like finished products. It's a thing that puts Nintendo like above and beyond most other companies in the AAA space, and that their games don't really release broken.
Yeah.
I say that with a full caveat for like Breath of the Wild, but
yeah, they come out almost universally polished and finished. But the drawback is they never lower in price.
Yeah,
Switch Breath of the Wild still will cost you $60, I think.
Yeah, probably. But the reason I come back to Skyrim is because of a lot of things that have been happening recently. You've probably seen a lot of companies going in for like NFTs recently. I know Ubisoft, I know like Square Enix, EA, all those big name companies that are really known for making games that just try to sell you shit in their microtransaction stores are going in for NFTs, and a lot of them have walked that back, but of course Ubisoft is like, no, we're gonna keep going with it. Like, they put out a thing recently, like, we've heard your outrage, and we're just gonna keep doing it because we think we'll make money off of it. And everyone's like, yeah, that sounds like Ubisoft.
Yeah, they basically were like, despite all of your rage,
yeah,
you're all just rats in our cage.
And it's weird because Ubisoft is one of the smallest AAA developers out there, so they're the ones like with the most to lose when it comes to stuff like NFTs. Whereas like EA just has FIFA. They make enough money, but they're also not the biggest company out there. I'm trying to remember who the biggest company out there is. It might be like Tencent or something, but
I don't know who that is. What's that?
Tencent is a Chinese company that owns everything.
Yeah.
They're like Disney if you didn't know Disney existed. They're like a shadow Disney. And somebody's like, somebody mentions Tencent, and you're like, you get that reaction, like, oh, what's Tencent? And then you can just start like listing companies they own and stock they have in like every pie. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, everything is a little bit owned by Tencent, and it's kind of scary how much they own and how little anybody knows about them. But the point is, like, all these game companies are trying to get in NFTs because microtransactions became the biggest money makers, right? And in the AAA space, money is the only thing that talks. It's the only thing people care about. When they talk about making a new game, the first thing they'll do is draw up a budget and then decide what that game is.
And that's exactly why marketing is so overvalued.
Yeah.
Because pre-orders are what pushes these numbers. And pre-orders happen because of marketing.
Yeah.
To go real quick back to the Cyberpunk, one thing that they did is they would never give footage to the reviewers that was from the actual game. They'd only use a specific sort of footage that made it look better than it did. I forgot
they shipped copies of the game. They wouldn't let people play it like before it was released,
Yeah.
And I think the few companies that did get to play it, they shipped copies of the game that weren't the actual product.
Yeah.
So they gave them like a functional taste of the game, or they just didn't let them talk about it at all. So they just built up their own hype, as many companies do now. They put
like
embargoes.
A very deliberate and actively deceiving method.
Yes, they'll put out embargoes on talking about the game. Bethesda did this for Fallout 76 as well. People were not allowed to play or talk about Fallout 76 until it released, and then when it released, the fucking floodgates of shit opened.
Yeah, and the thing is, to relate it back to like the core point of the updating is that's the issue is they need to promise you some hypothetical idea.
Yeah.
And so many people on so many whatever Reddit threads or Twitter or whatever you look at will say, well, it will, they're going to make it get there. It's going to be there at some point.
Yeah.
And so when that happens, all of our patience will be worth it. And they just get a free pass, right? Some of that is, sunk cost fallacy. I spent my money.
Yeah.
I gotta believe this will be a good game at some point. But, another game that I think is somewhat interesting is Final Fantasy 15. So
I thought you were going to say Star Citizen.
Yeah, I was going to say Star Citizen soon, but I was thinking about 15 in relation to this. 15 had a bunch of different... they basically scrapped the game halfway through and restarted. Yeah. That happens a lot. But we live in this marketing world. These games need to come out in a timely fashion. Final Fantasy 15 did not come out in a timely fashion, to be fair. But they released it before it was done. And it was not functional without a day one patch.
Right.
It had a day one patch, so you could play the game. But not everyone, right? Not everyone has internet, that's, and, we're getting closer and closer to, a lot of people having internet, but not everyone has the internet to do these patches.
Yeah.
And I don't super like that buying games off the shelf doesn't work a lot of the time anymore.
Yeah, it doesn't. Even when you buy a game, you put that disc in, and it still might be hours before you can play, because it has to it's not just like a read-write thing. It's not just putting data on there. It's like, okay, it took, maybe 30 minutes to read-write. But then, it might be 100 gig patch from day one, right?
Yeah.
Which we see in a lot of AAA products.
Yeah. So to contrast is one of my other favorite games of all time, Dragon Quest XI. Dragon Quest XI didn't have a patch for over a year.
Yeah.
They released a finished product. Now, albeit, Dragon Quest X was an MMO, so I'm not going to count that one. 9 came... The space between 9 and 11 is huge.
Yeah.
Right? But I literally bought a PS4 because of it. I got back into games because they announced Dragon Quest XI was coming out. And it was for the PS4. And I bought a PS4 because it was coming out in a couple of months. And then I played nothing else for 3 straight weeks. And it's one of my all-time favorite games. And it was just day one finished product. I walked in, I played the game. I had just a wonderful time. And I'm going to go back and replay it at some point.
Yeah.
They did eventually release a Switch version that had more content, which is kind of like a $60 DLC, which you can, take or leave. But it gets the game to a whole new audience, the Switch. And I think Dragon Quest was so good, I will spend an extra $60 on it.
Yeah.
I enjoyed giving them that money because it didn't feel like they were lying to me.
Yeah. But then there's Persona 5 Royal.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking about.
Which is just they re-released the game with a bit more content.
Yeah.
And it's not fundamentally different. It's just there's a bunch of extra stuff that kind of makes the game way easier.
Which is preposterous because the problem with Persona 5, one of the biggest problems with Persona 5, which I do like a lot of Persona 5, we'll talk about that at some point, is it's too fucking long.
Yeah.
So they're we added 3 extra months, and you're I really didn't like that.
Yeah.
I would honestly spend $60 to buy a thing that took out 2 dungeons. I would be so happy to be yeah, let's just not do these dungeons. They suck.
Yeah. But the concept of DLC actually goes back quite a ways. It didn't always exist, obviously, right? DLC came in with the digital age of games, which is what we're living in now. And one of the first most infamous DLCs, not really I don't want to say it's not the first DLC. It's nothing like that. Cuz that dates way back. But you could buy like map packs for Halo or Halo 2, shit like that. But one of the most infamous DLCs that I think really created the state of the industry that we have now was horse armor in Oblivion, the predecessor to Skyrim. Horse armor was a $2 pack, like cosmetic pack that you could buy, and it put armor on your horse. It wasn't functional. It was purely cosmetic, just made your horse look different. But you could buy it for $2. We already had like DLC content, Oblivion had DLC packs and stuff, but this was the first idea of like a small DLC, a microtransaction.
I've never heard of those.
Yeah, I don't want to say it's the first. Again, like people are going to be like, "Oh, you said the wrong thing." It's not the first. It's the biggest. It's the most influential. It was the moment that the industry took notice. Everyone was like, "Wait, you can sell horse armor for $2? You didn't just have to you didn't have to do that. You didn't have to make the game and then add a tiny little bit of content that people could buy." And so we got fucking microtransactions. The entire industry has changed since then, Now you've got your FIFAs and your fucking Fortnites and shit that are just primarily a store, and everybody's like, "Oh, how do we sell microtransactions continuously? How do we like make people want to continue buying them? What if we turn them into like a gambling thing? You can get the one you want, right? So let's make loot boxes and shit like that." And then at some point they gave up the facade and they're like, just put gambling in the game, right? Just literally put a fucking slot machine that tells you if you get the thing you want and make people spend thousands of dollars on their goddamn fucking soccer team. FIFA's the worst game. I said Skyrim's the worst game. FIFA's the worst game ever made.
Which FIFA, though?
Doesn't matter. The series. The series is exclusively bad in a way that's, like, horrific and detrimental to the people that play it. But that all started with, Skyrim, Oblivion. It all started with Bethesda's bullshit, because Bethesda got a taste of success and then thought, yeah, we're done making games we care about. Let's just make bullshit. Let's just make the most saccharine experience we can think of and sell it en masse.
And so what's crazy is because of things like loot boxes, the most profitable games right now are free-to-play games.
Yeah.
Because the loot boxes make them their money.
Yeah. You want to know what the most profitable game in existence is right now?
Fortnite?
It's fucking Clash of Clans.
I should have guessed that.
Yeah.
They can afford Kate Upton.
Yeah, of course. Like, the second someone says it, you're like, oh, yeah. Right? That game's free.
Yeah. I always use this as the Nintendo argument, which just sucks because it's my favorite Nintendo game. And it's not a good example of it. The game that makes Nintendo the most money is Fire Emblem Heroes, a gacha game.
Yeah.
If you don't know what a gacha game is, it's a game where like you can get little characters if you roll them. They're usually like sexy JPEGs of anime women.
Yeah.
You get
buying JPEGs.
Yeah, you can do it for free, or you can spend thousands of dollars a month.
Yeah, but then you
get those pictures.
But then you own the JPEGs, right?
That's right back to NFTs.
They're yours forever. Nobody else can touch them. Yeah, exactly. We're talking about NFTs.
There's no gameplay to those games.
Yeah.
Like the idea is you're just like, what do you like about Fire Emblem? We mostly took that out.
Yeah.
Grind up your stats or buy this pre-grinded stat thing.
Exactly. And like just the word gotcha. It's not like an English like gotcha, It refers to the Japanese word gachapon, which is just like it's kind of like a gumball machine. You put your money in and it dispenses a toy at random and you get what you get.
But right? Also what a happy coincidence.
It's the idea, yeah, exactly. Cuz
apropos,
cuz you start spending money on those games and like gotcha. But yeah, the idea is like, okay, it's randomized rewards, right? So they can keep selling you the same reward as long as they don't give it to you, and you get ideas like item tiers and stuff like that, right? Something we've seen in MMOs for years because the grind, right? But instead, what they've done is taken the grind and monetized it. Now you pay to grind instead of you don't just pay with your time, you pay with your actual dollars. And since that has been far and away the most successful business model video games have ever seen as an industry, now we've got people looking at NFTs. We've got all these companies being like, well, what if we could sell you more things? What if we could create a series of randomized images ad nauseum that you'll buy for like crazy money, you know? And everyone's like, yeah, that sounds really bad. Does that even add to the game in any way? Like, can you imagine any way that could add to the value of the game, the actual gameplay? And they're like, no, it'll add to the value of our bank account. That's the point. And that is a direct line from fucking horse armor in Oblivion to NFTs today. And it's a problem. It creates an industry that doesn't give a fuck about the players or the product anymore, as long as you'll buy it. And so you get these huge marketing campaigns that are like, Cyberpunk's gonna be the biggest thing you've ever seen. It's gonna be the coolest shit. Every person on this screen of 100 people lives their actual life, and you can follow them around, and they go home and they have sex with their fucking wife, and you can watch. It's gonna be so cool. And then you get in there, and you see, you know, your game is fucking broken. You can't do the first mission. When you're in a car chase and there's just like guns floating behind you chasing you because the car didn't load in. That's an actual thing that happens, you know?
Honestly, when Cyberpunk first came out, just going on Twitter looking up glitches, I was like, this is the best possible thing that could have happened to me.
Yeah.
Cyberpunk is garbage, and I can feel vindicated in my lack of pre-order
Let us go.
and then just watch hilarious glitches.
And I'm not one of those people that buys into the hype, you know? I was never like, oh, Cyberpunk's gonna be the coolest shit ever. But I was like, this game looks fun, you know?
Yeah.
Like, sure, I'll play like a Cyberpunk GTA. That sounds great, you know? I'll play that game if it works, and it didn't, you know?
Yeah.
Fallout 76 I wasn't in the slightest bit excited for because I've kind of hated Bethesda since Skyrim, you know?
Yes.
And like Fallout 4 was a massive disappointment.
Yeah, that's my favorite formula. Release now, do not update.
Never change.
Yeah, so I gotta say my favorite Fallout 76 story. Never played it, but I have a friend who's a huge Fallout, like, and it's exactly his aesthetic.
Yeah.
You know, just and it's, you know, he's an MMO guy, big like DayZ, any of those games where it's like, I'm just gonna walk around and like literally no one's around. I can just walk around in silence. You know, there's a market for that. So he really, really, really wanted to like 76. But he had a glitch where there was no sound in his game. And so what he had to do is he's like, well, you know, like deaf people exist. So I can role play as a deaf person. And he had to like play the game for a while, just pretending his character couldn't hear to try to have some sort of immersion. And like, you could not get a more forgiving customer and still didn't, you know, put a lot of hours into 76. And like, that's preposterous. Like, literally just the premise of your game works for this person. And it still didn't work.
Yeah.
Like, you didn't make it functional enough.
Yeah, you didn't make a fucking game. But you know what did work in Fallout 76 from day one? The store.
Yeah, for sure.
You could always buy atoms.
Yeah.
That was not a problem.
But this is kind of like an overarching theory of games and media and all this sort of stuff, you know? I kind of think of it as the Disney effect, right?
Yeah.
Is once these things turn from art into products, we're making assembly lines that can make these things. We're not really trying to make something that has kind of longevity and long lasting.
Yeah.
We're trying to get those day one impacts. In Disney, they get all of you to go see almost every one of their Marvel movies exactly once.
Yeah.
You go in the theaters, you watch it, you're like, I have a good time, rewatch it, you're like, well, those jokes I already heard, and it's kind of bad now.
Yeah.
They get you to pre-order these games. You go in, you do the pre-order, half the time, you don't even get a working game. So what I'm saying is not necessarily novel, it's like, you know, money's bad, guys. But since we're making an assembly line that can make these works of entertainment, we're kind of curating an experience that we know is going to appeal to the most amount of people. But what you're not getting is you're getting something that has a profound impact on some people.
Yeah.
And to me, that's what art's about, right? There are people who are going to go see a Scorsese film, and it's going to get into their brain, and they're going to think about it, and they're going to look at films, the world, or some macro concept differently.
Yeah.
You know, we can play games like Souls and Metal Gear games and really have deep intellectual conversations about like the implications, what we think about the philosophy, what we think about the game design, right? It's really, really hard not to talk about things like Skyrim and Assassin's Creed, and like Destiny and crap, as not just products of an industry.
Yeah.
Right? And, that's a kind of interesting, but it's also what everything in our goddamn universe is governed by.
Exactly.
And when you're locked into this world of we have to release the games on time, we have to crunch through it, we just gotta get everyone to pre-order it, and then maybe eventually make a good game, you're not crafting something.
Exactly. And the AAA industry, to me, it almost never truly creates anything artistic. It just creates, an assembly line that churns out, games, entertainment products at best, failures at worst, right? And it gets in my fucking brain when I think about it, because you just talked about somebody role playing as a deaf character in Fallout 76. There was a game released recently that in the indie sphere that was designed to be played by deaf people. It was a game designed for deaf people, and that
must be super fucking exciting.
Yeah,
for
I
a demographic.
I want to fucking play it. I want to play a game not designed for me. Designed for people with disabilities and stuff. I want to see what games can be. Right? And that's not saying every game has to be like a work of art. Every game doesn't have to make you have, high philosophical thoughts and shit, right? But when I see these indie devs cranking out like interesting products on literally their, like, sometimes in their spare fucking time.
Yeah.
Like single people out there working day jobs and at night building a game. I think, what would this vision be with $180 million? What could be made with teams of hundreds of artists and coders that instead of trying to create something valuable, they create something that's monetarily useful, right? Yeah. Like when we talk about AAA games that are meaningful, we talk about stuff that's like Last of Us, games.
I was literally thinking about that while we were talking.
Yeah, games that like have a meaning, that have something to say, that make you think about stuff, and like. Even Last of Us 2, which we're definitely going to talk about at some point in the future, because it's a brain bug that I can't get rid of.
I call them brain worms.
Yeah, it is a worm. But even Last of Us 2, whether you like it or not, it is a game that makes you fucking think about stuff, right? And that wouldn't exist if Naughty Dog didn't take the chance a long time ago to make Last of Us 1. Right? But even Last of Us 2 was like plagued by, a controversy of extreme crunch. In its creation, and like that taints the game. When the indie sphere can put out incredible products that challenge what games are, what games can be, when you get your infinite fucking Assassin's Creed, you just can't care anymore. Game like AAA creates games you can't care about. Because they don't want you to care. They don't want you to ever think about their games. They want you to play them ad nauseum and spend as much money as possible. That's the goal.
Yeah. So the one thing I've been thinking about a lot is I've absorbed a lot of Dark Souls commentary recently. And one thing I always think is so interesting is you could just critique that game differently than other games because you expect better from it, right? I mean, Souls are all great. My thesis statement is I love Souls. But a lot of times people will bring up a point and go like, yeah, I didn't like this in this game. It felt too video gamey. And that's just so interesting that you're allowed to say that with Souls.
Yeah.
You're just like, oh, it's too formulaic, and it shouldn't be because it's Dark Souls. Yeah. It's a game I think doesn't do it, that rises above that. And that's not always bad. Sometimes it's fun to have just, like a Zelda game that has simple systems that, are very linear progression trees. But I feel like people aren't critical of the same sort of things in games like Skyrim. Like, I maybe I am underestimating people, but I can't imagine ever liking that combat system. Yeah. And I never hear people complain about how bad combat is in Skyrim or all the Fallout games. It's just not engaging combat, It's
not just not engaging, it's barely functional.
Yeah.
It's not fun to use.
Yeah, like most of it is like, I'm doing this thing, and it's like, ooh, what's that like? And it's like the same as everything else, but, it's my fist this time.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas, use a different weapon in Dark Souls, it's completely different. It has, unique properties, and it makes you, engage with the actual systems. And I just feel like there's less of an expectation on the quality of content in some of these AAA experiences,
And I think a lot of that has to do with, like, misplaced belief in these companies, right? Because they have the money to fix it. They have the money and the resources to make these games good. theoretically.
Yeah.
Right? And so people are like, yeah, maybe it's not good at launch, but like you said, it will be good eventually. Right? They'll take the time, they'll spend the money to make it good, right? And they never do. But it doesn't matter because they have your money.
And the thing is, I think just people forgive these big open world games. But it's the biggest, openest world. It's what I want. Because a lot of people want that. They just want the world's biggest open world.
They want one game they can play, like, forever.
Forever, yeah. They want a Desert Island game.
Yeah. That's why Fortnite does so good.
Yeah, but I think it's a bad open world. They're one of the companies that can make an open world. They just didn't try to craft it in such a way where it's interesting, right? Where it's, look, Breath of the Wild's world's way smaller. Almost every inch of that game is interesting. Like, wherever you explore, I mean, yeah, sometimes you're climbing up fuck off Rain Mountain, right? But, it's fun, it's funner to do that because the world is just, you'll get up there and there'll be a shrine with a unique experience.
Yeah.
Sometimes that shrine makes you use the motion controls on your Switch and you want to die. But they're all crafted, they're not copy and pasted experiences. There's elements that are somewhat copy and pasted, like types of things. There's centaur enemies everywhere. There's big giants everywhere that, are similar. But they're different. They look different. They act different. They drop different things. There's different environments around it, different ways to fight it. They're done in a way where they planned a route. It's not just, we made an algorithm and we're going to duplicate this algorithm times 2,000 miles. They crafted so many rooms that it became a large open world.
Yeah.
And I much rather appreciate that. One more game I want to bring up. Red Dead Redemption 2. I'm not a big Rockstar fan. I understand there are probably a bunch of good Grand Theft Autos. It just never appealed to me because my funnest thing to do with Rockstar games is go play at a friend's house. Just do whatever the fuck I want for a couple of hours and then not buy it. You're like, I'm gonna go play Grand Theft Auto and crash a car into a helicopter. Got my Grand Theft Auto story. Time to go home.
Yep.
I just tried to fuck around as much as I could in Red Dead Redemption for a couple of hours on Ross's file once. And I killed a bunch of people, and I couldn't load their bodies onto trains. I got really upset. I wanted to make a corpse pile on trains. Whatever, you're not gonna let me do that. That's fine. I can't pick a guy up over a ledge, whatever. And then I just kind of went into a direction explored, and just trees and mountains and stuff. Just I'm not on the critical path. I'm not on a road. So it's just nature. And you're like, well, that's how it exactly would exist in real life. And you're like, yeah, but that's boring.
Yeah.
Right? If I'm in an open world and you have all this space, I want stuff in that space.
Yeah.
Right? I don't want to just climb to a mountain and get to the top of it and be like, well, that's what the top of a mountain looks like. Sure. Right? You climb a mountain in Zelda, Breath of the Wild, there's stuff up there usually.
Yeah, usually.
There's a rock thing. There's not. And if there's not, it's the exception, not the rule.
Yeah.
And again, I know there's a different audience who's just, I want a game that I can play for 300, 400 hours, right? Yeah. And that's not necessarily me. But I still think there's better experiences than these sorts of games. I think you can play that with Dark Souls. I think you can get more hours in Dark Souls than you can in Skyrim before you get bored, personally.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I put 800 hours into Monster Hunter World.
Yeah.
And
no one plays those fucking games in America.
Yeah.
In the West.
Yeah, it's a problem. I put several hundred hours just into Rise, and I haven't even played most content of Rise.
Yeah.
I stopped playing within a month or so.
Yeah, that's the shocking thing. To do a small Monster Hunter aside, a big part of the community was like, this base game's unfinished. Only got 200 hours into it.
Exactly.
And they're just like, what, man? And that's the thing is when you have games that do these things right, in my opinion, the expectations are different, right? And, that could be a legitimate complaint.
Yeah.
That there's not enough content in Rise relative to the other Monster Hunters. But there's no other game you would say that about.
Yeah.
And maybe we could or should.
But to be fair, that game didn't release unfinished. That game released without content as planned. Right?
Yeah.
They were like, we're going to roll out more content of Rise as people play the game.
Yeah.
That was planned. And that's completely legitimate. That's not like a release now, update later. That's we are releasing with intended updates, and the point is that we keep people playing and we keep content fresh. So that people don't just play for 300 hours and are done, and never pick up the game again.
Yeah, and it works because you're like, oh my god, Elatrion came out.
Yeah.
Let's go fight Elatrion.
Yeah, because
and then you're like, never mind.
Because their intended audience are the kind of people that want to play that game for months and months and months. That's fine, right? The point, we've been dancing around here. The point when you make art media, when you make a game or a movie or a book or anything like that, the things you say and the space you take up needs to be meaningful. When you read a book and a character, says a line, that line needs to inform you of something. It's not just that, not literally every single line, but the idea is when something is put forth as a fundamental part of a character, of a game, of a movie, or something like that, it needs to inform you of that part. When Skyrim says we have the biggest map in the world, the size of that map needs to be fundamentally important.
Yeah.
Instead of just, our map is so big and we filled it with bullshit, it needs to be filled with something important. Or, it needs to be fucking smaller. And I've been saying this for years. Games need to be smaller. Because smaller games tend to be more focused on what they're trying to say, on points they're trying to make. This includes games that don't have, philosophy behind them. Like, this morning I was playing Risk of Rain 2 with a friend of mine, which is just a cooperative PvE roguelike. It's you go through and you pick up a bunch of items. You pick a character, you pick up a bunch of items, and with those items you make a build. And by the end of that run, right, kind of like Hades, like by the end of the run,
like, why aren't you just playing Hades then?
Yeah, well, yeah, but this is cooperative PvE.
Oh, sure.
So by the end of that run, you and your friends have made like sick builds and are fucking damage monsters, and it's just fun to do. The game is fundamentally short. That game is so good to like play for a day or a weekend and then not pick it up for months, and then later when you're talking to your friends on Discord and they're like, what do we want to do? And somebody says, let's just play Risk of Rain. It's like, fuck yeah, that's fun. Because that game is what it needs to be. It's fun for a little bit, and then you put it down, and then later you come back, and it's just as fun as it was. Yeah. Because the space it takes up is exactly the space it needs to be what it wants to be. When something like Skyrim comes out, and they're like, oh, it's the biggest fucking world ever, it's just taking up too fucking much space, because it has nothing that it wants to do with that space. It wants to sell you an idea, and then give you nothing for it.
Yeah, and if you're saying, well, I really want Big World, I really want a game where, there's 1,000 choices and your choices matter. When has that ever been promised and worked out?
Exactly, I guess, play Mass Effect or, Dragon Age or something.
Oh yeah, remember in Mass Effect where they fucked up the ending and none of your choices matter, so they had to really patch in a new ending? That's exactly the problem, is, we promise, we promised this big concept, it didn't work out,
Yeah.
If you pay us, we'll give you a slightly more satisfying ending. And for a lot of people, it's too late.
Yeah.
To use my favorite example to talk about games lately, because it's our one true altar lord, Dark Souls. When there's a higher degree of risk, you try harder. Right? If you need to get your souls back in Dark Souls, you're more careful. Many games that I play, I'm just like, oh, whatever the fuck, I don't care if I die, right? Yeah. And so I play better. When you can update later, you're not going to try as hard, right? So a game I was going to relate it to that we mentioned earlier is Magic the Gathering. So Magic got big enough where they released way more sets, right? Way more cards per year, because more cards means more money, means more revenue. So they don't have as much time to test if these cards work or not. So now they have less time and less resources to test if things are balanced. There was a good decade where no cards got banned in the standard, the most normal format. We have so many a year over the last couple of years, and they just announced that they're going to start patching cards. That now Magic is mostly an online game, because the main format people are going to play now is a format where if they fuck up the cards, they'll change the numbers on it. Which is how Hearthstone and all the other card games work. But that's just, we now have a fundamentally different game. Magic turned into Hearthstone because Hearthstone is a more profitable model.
Yeah.
And they don't have to spend as much time crafting really good and balanced pieces They just kind of craft as much as they can and see what sticks. And if it's fucked up, they'll just change it.
Yeah.
And that lack of risk that the company has now makes it so we never get the same sort of average quality of product. That the designs aren't as clean. The wording isn't quite as thoughtful. Because it doesn't matter anymore. Because we just need to get more. It's not about making each piece really good. It's about releasing as many pieces as possible to generate as much profit as we possibly can.
Yeah. And that actually segues incredibly well into
You're welcome.
Another topic I want to talk about, obviously related, is what I've been thinking of as like the digitalization of games and the gamosphere in general. What I mean by that is the PS5 and the Xbox, whatever the fuck Xbox we're on. What is it?
I think it's
Series X or something.
I don't know why I think it's Scorpion, but that can't be right.
The Xbox Scorpion and the PS5.
God, that would just be better.
It really would be. They both released with digital-only editions of their consoles, right? Which is, they just don't have disc slots anymore. And this has been kind of...
Yeah, like, my computer doesn't.
I haven't owned a computer with a disc slot in years.
Yeah.
You know?
Where am I supposed to put my drinks?
I don't remember the last time. It's funny, because all the people who haven't seen a disc slot in their whole life, they kind of look like drink holders. But
yeah, it's a 5-year-old meme.
But the point is, by trying to like phase out digital media, like GameStop wouldn't sell digital edition onlys for a bit. Like they were trying to say no to it because it directly damages their sales, right? And GameStop is of course failing.
Yeah, GameStop's like staring at a Circuit City, like fading from the horizon. And then like up in heaven, sorry, not in heaven, sorry.
No, that's not where those businesses go.
Up in the sky, it's like Mufasa and Radio Shack staring down as they join them in the cloud.
GameStop comes home and they like grab a beer out of the fridge, and when they turn around, there's like a Radio Shack standing there. You know, they blink and they rub their eyes, and the Radio Shack's gone, and they're like, "No, you foul spirits!" The death of physical media isn't purely a thing that's like the game industry's fault, but the game industry is more and more heavily transitioning into digital media almost exclusively. The Steam store has existed forever. And Steam is as like, it's good for a lot of game releases, like a lot of bigger name releases, but it's also an absolute wasteland of indie garbage, right? Like, if you type in, survival crafting into Steam, you will lose your faith in people's ability to make games. But most importantly, like, all of these games, all of these industries are shifting towards a digital-only landscape. And the point of that is not for accessibility. It's not like, okay, I don't have to get a disc shipped to my house anymore. I don't have to go out to the GameStop. There's obviously an environmental good in that, like, we're not just designing a ton of plastic cases for every single game that exists. That's fine, right? But that's not why they're doing it. That's not why they're going digital. It's because when games are digital, the companies that make them have more and more influence over what those games are and who owns them. More and more games are switching into not exactly the Steam model, but like the Xbox Game Pass model, or what PS Now is about to become, because they're trying to transform PS Now into like a model that competes with the Netflix Game Pass
model.
It is the Netflix model, right? Where you just buy a subscription and then you can just play games, right? But you don't own those games, right? You don't own the games you make anymore. And the more games are hosted on servers, the more games are like, okay, to play this game, you're going to require updates. You're going to need an internet connection. The more we say, okay, we can update that game later and make it better or fix problems and things like that, the more we risk those games failing to exist in the future. Like, it's not to say that like all servers are bad, but like, what is Demon's Souls from the PS3? What is that without its servers? It's still a good game, but it's lacking something, right?
It literally has a boss that can be a different player.
Yeah.
A different player can be the boss and you have to beat a player. And without that boss is just kind of boring.
Yeah, it's super boring, right?
Versus, holy shit, this is one of the coolest things ever.
And like the Soul series in general, it runs heavily off of like people leaving messages for other players to point you in the right direction or the wrong direction, because that's fun, right? There's an interaction in the community that's there's an interaction element in the community that's really valuable in those games. And like, what are they going to be when their servers shut down? You know, what are we just going to remake? Dark Souls 1 for the PS6 or whatever? Or we already remade.
I hope so.
Me too. But we already remade Demon Souls. My point is, as games become more digital, we own less of them, right? We become less in charge of what we're purchasing. And the idea, the goal, especially of the AAA industry, is that you don't own your games at all. It's all subscription bullshit, It's all Destinies and World of Warcrafts and League of Legends and Fortnites and shit. It's everything that they can just continue to suck money out of you. And
what's better than one lump of money? A continuous stream of money.
Exactly. Someday you're not going to buy the next FIFA game. You're just going to continue paying your FIFA subscription for the next.
It's only $60 a year. It's also one weird side note. Like, I'm a big sports guy, but I never buy these games new because you can buy like a game that's 2 years old for $2.
Mm-hmm.
But it's crazy that they're still they still just get everyone like, well, I gotta get the new one. There's slight roster updates that they don't let me do in like a slightly older game, but like all the old ones cost no money, yet their system is incredibly profitable.
Yeah, they lose their value almost instantaneously. That's the other thing with physical media is you can almost always find a physical copy of a game for cheaper than you can buy it on the store.
Unless it's Nintendo.
Well, also some games are being regulated to, or sorry, not regulated. Also, some games are being relegated to exclusively subscription services, right? So, like, you could buy a physical copy for, whatever, $5, or you can pay a $40 subscription to play it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's like, that's bad. That's not good. And it also, it's like you said, it incentivizes them to work less hard on those games. Because they just put them out, and if it doesn't work, it's very little risk for the companies to make games and put them out at that point. But it's still the same risk for you to buy them. Not to mention the price hike of games up to $70 now,
Yeah, which is becoming slowly untenable.
Slowly.
Yeah.
It's been untenable since they were above 40, frankly.
Yeah.
But I will say this much. 2021 has been a fucking awful year for the AAA industry. It's just been bad. And the indie scene is booming like we've never seen it before. Like, so many of the biggest games of the year are now indie games. And that trend has been occurring for a few years. But it's like, people just are caring less and less about AAA products, which I think is good for all the reasons we've said. That's not to say all indie products are good. Like I said, Steam is an absolute fucking wasteland of indie games that just aren't good. Like, early access is a blight on the industry, I think. But at the same time, you occasionally get, your Subnauticas and shit.
Yeah. This goes to the No Man's Sky problem, right? Where you can have these indie games that can promise a whole bunch, and maybe if the early access works out, they get the funding, right? Or you get stuck in the Star Citizen problem.
Oh my god.
Where, look, maybe one day this world will be as big as they promise. I fucking don't believe it.
No.
Like, I never believe that inherently, and I feel like I've been hearing about Star Citizen since Phantasy Star Online. That's a reference only I probably get. But that's the issue, right? Is you can believe in this game and throw money into it and hope, go in their Kickstarters or their OnlyFans. I don't know how they do it anymore. and hopefully get the product that they promised to you, or it might never happen.
Yeah.
And part of this is the issue that, the huge chunk of the pie, the AAA, the AAA industry owns, because they have these extreme marketing teams, right? But like, one of the reasons, Star Citizen has, a decent amount of backers is because a lot, you, the audience, have probably heard of it, right? There's definitely indie games, we've referenced today that a good portion of people are going to be like, I never really heard of that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just shockingly important to get your name out there. It's shockingly important to promise more than that you can offer, right? And it's becoming more and more crucial to have these sort of like early access and beta bullshit where they can they can just have unfinished products, and everyone's like, well, it's the beta. You know, eventually this will all be fine and dandy.
Yeah.
You know, it's a problem now, but it won't be a problem when it comes out. And it just leads to this sort of false optimism and this lack of attention to detail that all these creators.
Yeah. I also think it leads to fundamentally unfinished products even at their official launch. Like, how many years did Ark sit in early access, right? Like, more than a decade.
I still can't even imagine what that game is.
It's survival crafting against like robot dinosaurs, and you can like tame them and stuff.
You're describing Horizon Zero Dawn.
Yeah.
Okay.
But Ark is also an MMO. Ark was
really just don't have that many ideas in the AAA industry, do we?
Oh, Ark is not AAA. Ark is, you know, it was.
It's big enough. It's a big game.
It is big now, right? But it took you know a decade for it to get big. But Ark was releasing DLC packs while it was still in early access. Like,
that's insane.
It just stayed in early access forever. And then one day it was just like, yeah, I guess we'll release now, you know? But like, that game was never truly finished, not in any way that like you would really think, you know? And the same has been true of minigames, like notably more recently. I say recent, it's many years, but The Forest, right, was a survival crafting multiplayer game where it was like you landed on an island, you had to survive, but there's also like cannibals in the woods and monsters and stuff. And there's like some kind of sophisticated AI going on between the cannibals. You can do things that like scare them off, and you can do things that kind of make them like you more, and they kind of communicate between one another. It's like if two of them show up and you kill one of them, the other one will run away, and then he'll come back later that night with his friends, and they'll try to kill you, that kind of stuff, right? But that game's janky and buggy. All right, it's conceptually very interesting, but it's janky and buggy, and it always has been, even when it was early access. And then it went into full release, and just none of it was fixed. They were just like, I guess we're just done, you know, being in early access. We're just going to release it, but we're not going to fix anything. It's just going to be janky and buggy. And now there's like a VR version of it, which sounds fucking terrifying, honestly. Like legitimately, I don't want to play that game in VR because I think I'll shit my pants, right? It would legitimately be so scary. But it would also be janky and buggy.
Yeah.
You know, because I know it is. And what kind of model does that set? You know, when we think about like, that's a successful indie game, and what it did a few years in early access and then just decided to stop updating itself and go into full release. Like, that's bad.
Yeah, to put on my tinfoil hat, you ever wonder if it's like buggy stuff can trend on Twitter and like there's no such thing as bad press.
That's true.
You know, like you know, maybe there's some sort of you put these betas out and you have this jank and you just get people talking about it.
Yeah, I mean, how many people bought Fallout 76 because they had a YouTube channel and they knew that was going to be like solid content to just be like, look how bad this is. Yeah. You know, like, I mean, I wouldn't say it's like a huge market, but it's not nobody.
Yeah, right.
You know?
Yeah.
So no press is bad press, and I think that's a significant problem. And I mean, I think in many ways Steam is a problem, right? Because like, one of these days, one day, Steam's not going to exist anymore. And yeah, people have told me, people have said, when Steam eventually shuts down,
just lose all your games.
Well, from my understanding, Valve has been like, no, we'll make a way for everybody to download their games permanently, you know? But like, a lot of people have libraries of hundreds or thousands of games.
Hey, you don't have that hard space.
No, yeah, like who's got the space for that? And
many people just buy games on sale and then like, maybe one day I'll play it.
Yeah, and also like, yeah, Steam has the files and stuff, but like, are they gonna be able to deliver on that promise? You know? My question really, or are they even going to be willing to deliver on that promise? My question really is like, when that day comes, are you going to lose all your games on Steam?
And, you know, video game companies notoriously great at keeping their promises, right?
Exactly.
Everything we've talked about.
So these kind of things honestly make me worried, you know, the continued digitalization of the industry, the lack of respect for both player and product that the AAA industry shows.
Yeah.
The disturbing space that Steam's created, or not just Steam, but every platform that really allows indies, like even Switch and stuff. There's a lot of just like not just bad games, but like games that are just asset flips and stuff like that.
And there's a level of media that's all kind of like this transient nature of it, but like you can watch Citizen Kane and talk about what it did and what it felt. I get that playing Pong on the Atari isn't the same that it was, right? But it's interesting. It's there. It allows you to take the medium more seriously. It allows you to look at games like art more critically, right? Instead of no one's gonna ever say Fortnite's art. I mean, maybe someone will. Maybe making up dance moves on models is artistic in a certain way.
Fortnite doesn't make up dance moves; it steals them from TikTok.
Is it really?
Yeah, so like
I keep up with this shit.
Oh no, very very famously, the Flossie dance, which is what the dance that Fortnite
that came from Fortnite. Oh my god,
no, it didn't.
But like it's popularized because of Fortnite.
Yes, because what was before TikTok? The
Vine.
Vine, yeah. So a young black kid made a Vine where they were doing the Flossie dance, right? And then Fortnite, Epic Games, stole it and put it on their store for money.
But what if we made celebrities do it on Jimmy Fallon? Oh my god.
No, that's the thing. It's like Epic copyrighted it. It's theirs. They stole it and they've made millions of dollars off the Flossie dance. Right? It's not theirs. God, and that's not the only one they've done that with.
Who do you think's more upset? That or the Naked Baby on the Nevermind album by Nirvana? Right? Like, they're both exploited in very weird ways. Maybe it's an icebreaker for the Nevermind guy, right? He's I'm on that album.
I'm that Naked
Baby. My penis is bigger than now, please take me.
And they're like, what's Nevermind?
Oh god. I dated myself so much. I'm like, I don't know about this new stuff. And you're like, what's the old TikTok? Fine, I know that one. Yeah. I remember Obama's first term like it was yesterday.
But yeah, like that's the kind of thing, Epic does, right? Like
yeah, that didn't derail you.
Yep, not at all.
So this kind of relates to an argument I make a lot about movies, right? With the Disneyfication of movies. Is there's one side of the argument that's kind of like, well, people are having fun. Like, a lot of people enjoy these movies. Like, just let people have fun. And yeah, I like some of these movies. I'm not saying they're all bad. But the consequence is we have an extremely homogenized product, right? You're not going to get a new Matrix. Like, I mean, you'll get another Matrix.
They literally just released a new Matrix.
But not a movie. Like, when the Matrix came out, everyone's like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah.
You don't get these paradigm shifters anymore. Because when they look at the paradigm, they're like, well, how can we make 14 of these? Right?
Yeah.
Now, they're going to keep making Matrixes. They're going to keep making Star Wars. They're going to keep making Marvel movies. They're going to keep making everything that you've already seen.
I really don't like you saying they're going to keep making more Matrixes, because that just hit me like a truck.
Yeah, it's 100%.
Just didn't want to ever have that thought in my head.
No, like we are probably 5 years away from a new Back to the Future trilogy. Like, that's...
You shut your fucking mouth!
That's just the reality, is we're not...
Those are my favorite movies.
Yeah, we're trying to sell something we know sells.
I want to be clear. I don't want more of them. They were perfect and done.
Yeah. Yeah. How did all these extra Star Wars go? And so, a good example, I'll use Star Wars for example. The Disney movie that I think people like the most from the Disney Star Wars is Rogue One. And I remember leaving the theater, and we're all walking out, and everyone's like, oh, what do they think? And I was like, I don't really like it that much. And again, I know a lot of people like this movie. And I remember them being like, well, there's nothing egregious in it. And I was like, yeah, but it was boring. And they're like, well, it was just boring. And I'm like, yeah, that's bad. I went to go see a Star Wars movie and I was bored.
Yeah, this is an entertainment product.
Yeah, that's not great. And it's like, yeah, it did all the thing. I heard TIE fighters. Yeah. I saw lightsabers.
Contrarily, me and a few friends recently went and saw the second Venom movie. And we came out and we were all just like, how was that? And everybody's just like, yeah, that sucked, but it was very fun to watch.
Yeah.
It was incredibly poorly made, but very fun.
Yeah, and again, sometimes it's fun to play these these janky nonsense early access games. Yep. It's a similar thing as you have your friends and you sit around and you make fun of it. But we are trending towards the product that we know we can sell. We know we can sell GTA. So we're going to get GTA clones until the day we and everything else dies.
Yeah.
We know shooters work. We're going to have infinite shooters. And just, I don't see the next Dark Souls being that close around the corner. I don't see these paradigm shifters other than in the indie sphere that are really going to significantly change what we're looking at. Because it's not profitable to go out on a limb.
Yeah.
Right? It's just release something that you know that works and then tune it until everyone shuts up.
Yeah, exactly. And especially in the indie sphere, like this is a super detriment because a lot of people I respect, like a lot of critics I respect, have talked about a specific game, Disco Elysium, as one of the greatest games ever made. I've had Disco Elysium in my Steam library for many months now, and I'm just not playing it until we can make a podcast about it because I don't want to get into it. I don't want to put that worm in my brain just yet, right? But
it's cool. We got Dark Souls worms.
Yeah, we got the Dark Souls worms. But I'll respect the hell out of that game, and I respect everyone that said it's one of the greatest games ever made. But I wonder how many people have even played it. Like, is this a game that it's just people are going to talk about? It's like, oh yeah, that game was phenomenal, and like nobody fucking played it except just the regular people who are already playing indie games, right? Disco Elysium is not going mainstream. Not in the way that, like, Hades did,
Yeah.
People talk about Disco Elysium, but people rave about Hades,
yep.
And I wonder, where the disconnect is. Like, how do we make indie games that are actually quality? How do we make those mainstream? How do we get that into the public sphere? And how do we let them change the way games are made? Because so many indie games, even now, they're iterations on the same concepts that we see in AAA. It's like, okay, this game is, a top-down Souls-like Metroidvania, right? That's fine. It might be a really good one, but it's not innovative in that way. Yeah. It's not generating a new genre in the way that, like, Souls did,
Yeah, like, AAA companies aren't trying to make versions of Undertale, right?
Exactly. Right? It's one of the biggest games of the last, like, decade or so.
You had to make sure it was a decade ago, right? You're like,
I had to think about it.
I hope it was not 15 years ago.
I was like, I don't want to add another decade to this thought,
Yeah.
But yeah, it's one of the biggest games in the indie scene. You've called it one of the core pillars of indie, and I believe that wholeheartedly. But no AAA company is trying to make an Undertale.
Yeah, or making
the closest. The closest AAA comes to making intellectual games is like another Last of Us.
Yeah.
Right? And that's like the one company that made Last of Us. And they kind of suck.
Yeah, and like, insert Death Stranding thought here. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, Death Stranding is it. Can we even consider Kojima Productions a AAA company? Like, kind of, right? Because the product they put out was what we would consider like AAA quality. Even though I really don't want to use those words. Because I don't think AAA is a measure of quality. It's a measure of budget and sort of like manpower. Yeah. It's a measure of like, what is the scope of game you can put out?
Yeah, sure.
But it doesn't necessarily speak to the quality of that experience, right? Because again, you can make your Skyrims all day. Like, one person can't make Skyrim. You need a AAA company to make Skyrim. That doesn't make it good.
I recently learned that Kojima did not want to make Metal Gear Solid 4, and he kind of under protest, and that makes me feel so much better about him.
Yeah, no, he didn't want to make it.
Yeah, I just didn't know that about 4 specifically. He really didn't want to make it, and you're like, I forgive you now.
I don't know about that. But
yeah, it's just really funny. Like, he's like, oh, you want me to make this? I'm going to be so annoying.
I'm going to be so fucking petty about
this. Literally, I'm going to make Rose the person you call.
Raiden's going to fight Vamp with a sword in his feet.
Yeah.
It's going to be a fetish.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, he didn't want
how much egg cooking can I get away in this game? 0?
We're going to need a little bit more than that.
I'm pasting.
Nobody can see your hands.
Hey, I don't think it's for the cast. I think it's for you.
No, this is all staying in.
Oh, God, Jesus. I just like the Kojima being like, who is the most annoying... You sing... She sing terribly? Bring her over here.
Bring her over. Come here. Sing for me.
Yeah. It's going to be Ogla Glukovich's daughter. No one knows what you're talking about.
That's my fucking point.
Sunny, like the egg.
Yeah, so yeah, he didn't want to make that game. He was, I don't know if he was done with 3, but he didn't have another Metal Gear in him at the time.
Yeah, it's just, like, well, he's like, I think what it was just like, oh, I want to make new stuff. I want to make the same thing forever. Yeah. And it's exactly the thing we're talking about. It's like, Konami's like, no, you have to make the same thing forever.
Metal Gear needs
to be made. It works. He's like, I want to make a game where you deliver packages. And they're like, bunch of reasons we don't want you to do that. But also, mostly are greed. But also, Jesus, that's really what you want to make?
Oh, yeah. And so, yeah, 4 was obviously a mess. But then he did come and make 5. And 5 was like a genuine effort. But I also think it's interesting, like, how that series develops over time, like, the way it kind of worked. You know, for, like, in Metal Gear Solid 1, it's all about being sort of an anti-hero.
This part's gonna be a bitch to edit.
Well, in Metal Gear Solid 1, they're like, the whole thing is about, like, how Snake is no hero. You know, like, the legendary soldier is no fucking hero at all, right? Because there's no heroes in war. And then by 5, they're just like, they're just sucking off Big Boss on screen, you know? Because that's what the series became about. It doesn't matter.
It didn't come up with the ideas. It came about the assets inside those ideas.
Yeah, like, it doesn't even matter what they say about Big Boss by the end. It's the fact that, like, that 3, 4, and 5 all revolve around how fucking important Big Boss is. You know? It doesn't matter what they say about it at that point. It's the fact that half the series, more than half the series, just revolves around how important Big Boss is as a person on a global scale. And it's interesting that they completely, like, 180.
Yeah, like, it undercuts your original message.
Yeah.
And, you know, part of that, I think, is, okay, you just have to keep talking about these same characters. And you're like, but I already talked about it.
Yeah. But Battlefield. I mean, even the same thing in, like, Death Stranding, you know, is like, okay, you have your main character being, like, the everyman, you know, just like a postal worker out there to save the world, but he's also the chosen hero. Yeah, you know, named specifically
the chosen postman.
It really is, you know. So it's
this is like so close to that community, but I am the truest repairman.
The truest repairman. Oh, but yeah, it's just interesting how those series develop, right? And the same thing with like Souls is, you know, like. You get a lot of innovation in the early Souls game, and by 3, it's just like, can we pander?
I know what that is. Yeah.
Right? Remember all the stuff? Remember the Storm Ruler? Yeah. You know what that is.
So remember how it made you feel emotional reaction? Can you just remember that? Yeah. Because it's hard to generate that same emotional reaction again.
Yeah, making games is hard, but it's really profitable. So we're gonna keep doing that, and just if you could just kind of work with us on that one, you know?
Yeah. To go back to the one of the 2 wells I really like in this is, maybe I'm just a hyper nerd and I grew up with this or whatever, but when Han Solo shoots those TIE fighters in the Death Star trench run in The New Hope, I literally 90% of the time my hair stand up on my arm. Yeah, it just gets me. I can't imagine doing that for a Disney Star Wars. For a prequel, nonetheless, the Disney Star Wars.
What, you didn't feel that way when Rey shot those speeders that were chasing her in episode 9?
Yeah, or
she like threw a chain under their motorcycle and it flipped and exploded and threw the guy into a wall.
Or Poe, a character we just met who just sunk into the sand and died, isn't dead. I'm like, you're back. I almost know who you are. You're a kind of a proxy for something I am actually attached to.
Yeah. What were we talking about?
Metal Gear, rambling.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I was saying an aside to you, and then you just went with it.
I had stuff to say.
Yeah.
But Metal Gear and Dark Souls, their evolution over time does speak to the idea of, like, what games can be and what we can expect from them.
And they're kind of like the people I trust the most.
Yeah, that's kind of true. I don't know how much I trust Kojima,
yeah.
But at the same time, like,
one of us is saying it wrong. Don't know who.
Kojima, call us up and tell us.
Yeah, let's start a blood war with you.
Yeah.
Look, my opinions on Kojima are like, see, now I'm saying your way. But, well, yeah, like, I don't want to have
one of us is winning.
Yeah, fuck off. I value uniqueness. Not only uniqueness is good, but, like, yeah, he bucks fucking trends. He doesn't give a shit.
It's true.
And so, like, that's what made Dark Souls work.
Yeah.
Which we will definitely talk about for more than a month. Yeah.
Maybe 5 months straight.
Yeah,
Who knows?
We'll see how far I can get into Sekiro.
We'll do that one last. It's fine.
Yeah. A phrase I've heard used to describe From Software is they're characterized by their indifference to the player. And that's really interesting. And that, you know, Kojima's not quite that, but, like, it's a similar idea where it's, we don't care what you're looking for. We're making something. You might like it.
Yeah.
And that's how stuff is invented.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's how we get new ideas, new art forms, stuff that really, shifts paradigms. And maybe you won't have to play the same goddamn PvP game where they're slightly shifting how much damage your guns do or how much AP scaling your items have. If you just get different genres every once in a while. You know, every time we get anything remotely resembling a new genre, like Battle Royale, it, like, destroys the industry for a second. It's just like, we have 100 different types of games. And, like, you know what? One of those you're probably going to like, right? And that's cool. You know, like, it's, even though Battle Royale got, blown out of proportion, that's a lot of game time for a lot of people who are looking for that sort of thing. And that's cool.
Yeah.
You know, people like PUBG, people like Apex, people like Fortnite. There's really nothing wrong with that.
It was actually so funny when Fortnite first came out, PUBG tried to sue them for taking their thing. Because, like, PUBG originated the Battle Royale genre, right? But PUBG was created by basically, like, Unity assets. They basically just bought asset packs and made a game out of it, right? Like everyone does. But there was literally nothing in their game that was, like, original, that you could brand as exclusive to PUBG, right? They, like, tried to, like, brand having a frying pan in the game. They're like, okay, that's our thing. We have a frying pan in the game. We're famous for that.
Nintendo like, Super Smash Brothers Melee, bitches!
Exactly, right? PUBG tried to sue a number of companies for making other battle royales, but their game was so fucking generic in all of its assets that they had no legs to stand on. PUBG originated battle royale, and then Fortnite came in and made every asset in their game specifically cartoony and weird so that it was exclusively theirs.
Well, also my favorite thing was, like, that wasn't the original intention of Fortnite. It was, like, some sort of one-player building experience. And they're like, whoa!
They added a BR mode after.
Yeah, they're like, hey, did you notice this dead horse spitting out money right outside our door? Let's fucking kick it.
Now they've created a machine that's like a series of boots on a wheel that just continually kicks the horse.
Ruth Bader Ginsburg machine.
But it's so funny to me that the originator of one of the biggest genres in the world right now created the most generic product in the world so that they couldn't even make claim to the genre.
Yeah. And
their single biggest competitor, like the people just came into the sphere and did it 1 billion times better than them and took over entirely.
Yeah. God, real quick, I loved at the beginning when PUBG first came out, where everyone's like, oh my god, this game looks terrible. It's like, yeah, you turn the graphic filter all the way down so bushes don't appear. And so, like, everyone played with purposely the lowest quality to get better strategic advantages, and it's like, okay, this sounds like a mess.
I do that in Valheim, actually. Valheim is a multiplayer survival crafting game, but it's, like, aesthetically really cool because it's all Viking times, right?
You probably guessed by the name.
Yeah, it's that Viking aesthetic, but the buildings are all, like, you build Viking buildings. It's designed in such a way that, like, makes you build that way, and it's interesting because there's just no other game that builds like that. You know, the things you make in Valheim are very unique when compared to the rest of everything else you make in any other survival crafting game, you know, including even like Minecraft. But Valheim, you have to run around in the forest a lot and like hunt deer and things like that, and like find mushrooms and flowers and stuff. And if you just turn down like it's not all the graphics, but it's like the level of detail on the ground. All the grass goes away.
Yeah, put the foliage button down.
You can just see shit. You know,
Yeah.
it's like the first thing I do on Valheim is just turn off the grass.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm just running around like these barren hills covered in trees and stuff. But it doesn't even look bad. Like it's not a bad way to do it. It's just something you get used to. I just think it's interesting that like that is an instance of intentions from the developers clashing with the actual gameplay. What players want from it, right? Because you can't just say you can, but you can say I'm just going to make a game that's for me, or I'm going to make a game that's for players. But you still want to say something either way you do that, right? I'm not expecting people to put out over and over like The Longing, which is a game that takes 400 real days to play.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, right? That's a game made for the developer. They were working something out when they made that game, right? I don't expect other people to make that, but I wonder what would happen. Like, why can't AAA studios put out shit that's like Papers, Please? You know? That's...
Explain
like,
that.
Papers, Please is one of the biggest indie games in the world. Like, I
bet you a lot of people don't know what None of my friends know what Papers, Please is.
That's sad. Papers, Please is made by Lucas.
It's a really specific and weird thing.
I mean,
I understand it's big, but like, it is, you know...
It's big in the gamosphere, I'll say that.
Yeah.
Right? Papers, Please is one of the standout indies, and explaining it feels wrong, but it's a paper simulator, right?
That's not right. A paper simulator.
I don't want to. All right, so I'll explain Papers, Please. The premise of it. All right, you're this guy in this totalitarian country called Arstotzka, and you have been chosen for the October labor lottery, which means you work the border. People line up outside all day, and they bring to you their papers to cross the border. And you have to verify all their papers have the correct information and decide if they get across or not. Sometimes there's like terrorist attacks at the border and stuff like that. Sometimes people will present you with moral choices. Like one of the very first ones that comes in, a guy comes in and his papers are all good, and you're like, cool, go on through. And he's like, thanks. My wife's right behind me, you know? And he goes through, and his wife comes through, and her papers are wrong. And now you're faced with a choice of, do I turn away this man's wife? Do I split this family across the border? And the reason you make that choice is because you are being paid for every person that you put through correctly, and you're deducted for every person you put through incorrectly.
Which also has almost no real effect on tangibly what you do.
Yeah, well,
right? Like your money affects your family, but your family is represented by just a status screen.
Yeah, it's literally...
Like, are they cold, sick, hungry?
It goes to a black screen, and there's like a circle, and it says wife, son, you know, I forget all. There's like only a few. Yeah, like and uncle. they just have a status that says, you know, okay, tired, hungry, sick, that kind of thing. And it's a list. The only thing else on the screen is a list of charges, right? This is what it costs to live here. This is the salary you made. This is your cost for food, for heat, for medicine. And you don't make very much. You make almost nothing. And so the idea of like, do I put me and my family in a little more danger by letting this woman through and keeping that family together? Or do I just heartlessly turn her away at the border and split them up for the sake of my own family, which in this game have very little meaning to you. And in fact, if they die, is a financial boon to you because you no longer have to pay for them.
I wonder if the person listening to us who's really mad at us for our anti-Skyrim is like, they like the package delivering game and the paper checking game? And they're like, Skyrim's boring. Those fucking idiots. Add us at bossdoor4.
Yeah, let me know how much you don't give a fuck about what I'm saying. But Papers, Please is one of my favorite games of all time. But beyond that, it's not a hard game to create. It is a singular vision from the creator Lucas Pope. But it's like...
Yeah, Curse of the Obra Dinn, I think, is his most popular game.
It is now, yeah. But
yeah.
But like...
Just something you might have heard of, audience.
Yeah, Curse of the Obra Dinn.
Skyrim guy who's mad at us.
That game's great. I wish I could play it more, but it is a puzzle game, and it's hard to read.
Yeah, that's how puzzle games work, right? Yeah.
You have to like wait enough years that you forget everything.
That's the Shadow of the Colossus problem.
Yeah.
You'll never have that one experience like your first Shadow of the Colossus experience.
Yeah.
Staring off in the distance.
But my question is like,
love that game.
Why are these kinds of games, like smaller, more focused projects, so exclusive to the indie sphere? Why do we have to have an endless amount of Assassin's Creeds and Far Cry's and the next iteration of World of Warcraft and shit. Like, why do we have to have Overwatch 2 when they could be putting their efforts towards something valuable, something like truly meaningful in games? Really, like, it doesn't even cost anything to fucking do it. Lucas Pope made that by himself. You know, that's the point. Is like, why did the indie scene have to be so separate from the AAA scene? And the truest reason, what we've been talking about this whole time, is money. Because the indie scene, for all of its flaws, is driven by a goal to create art. Not every
people who have visions.
Yeah, not every indie company is doing that, right? Like, some of them just want to make it big.
Yeah,
but
an idealistic person who hasn't gotten bought yet.
Well, even these companies, to make it big, they have to. They feel they have to make some sort of artistic impact. Like, for all of No Man's Sky's problems, they wanted to make something new and interesting in the world. No Man's Sky was a standalone game. For all of its flaws, it was something new. You know, that just can't be said of like any AAA product anymore. And it drives me crazy, you know? Just conceptually funny to just be like, yeah, Papers, Please is a game where you check people's papers at the borders and you turn them away if it's incorrect, or you let them through if it's correct. End of story.
Yeah, but just imagine like a AAA company taking control of that, where it's like,
oh my god.
Okay, so we have a DLC pack that has 4 different types of fonts. Right? And then you're like, okay, this is Snackin'. It sounds like a real Twitch name. I tried to make something up.
Oh, I thought you were going
I think it's a real Twitch person.
It's gotta be, right?
I'm Snackin'. I'm
Snackin'.
sorry if I'm slandering you, Snackin'. If you're real, I don't know. Yeah, so I'm gonna be playing a Paper Please speedrun. I'm doing the hardest challenge, Wingding. All the symbols are this really unusable font from Microsoft Word. You might not know what that is. But yeah, let's get to it. You know, another task-assisted Paper Please player.
I don't know if there's
optimizing his moves.
I know there's Papers, Please speedruns, but the thing is, that game is not randomized. Every person you see is the same person every time.
Yeah.
It's not long, but it's...
Yeah, you gotta memorize everything.
You can spend 10 hours in that game, you know?
Yeah.
So you're not, like, if you've played it before, you don't remember everybody that shows up. Like, you there's no way you're like, oh, I remember the series, like...
Call.
I remember, like, go, turn around, go, turn around, you know, like, you don't remember orders of people like that, because you'll deal with... You probably get through, like, 15 or 16 people a day, you know?
Yeah.
For like, a whole month. I think it's... Yeah, it's like a whole month. It's a while.
Imagine if Guitar Hero had the release now update later, and they would just like change the notes on it, like how pissed off people would be. Because like I remember very specifically, I used to like go to an arcade and play Dance Dance Revolution, and I could draw a crowd, not because I was good, but because I would step early, and then I would jump up because I realized I stepped early and try to land back down on the right time. So I just looked like a jackrabbit on heroin, I guess, you know? And so people were like, and I was doing it barefoot. So people were like, what the fuck? Like, he's like, I'm doing like an intermediate song and I look like I'm doing like the hardest thing in the world. And I'm like, C+. And so I had like a tiny crowd in an arcade, and this guy came up and he was like all swag and stuff. And and I was like, ooh, he's like, you can pick the song. So I was like, here's the hardest song for me on intermediate. And he's like, I'm going to put mine up to the hardest. And then he did the whole thing not facing the screen. He was just like, I'm going to blow this kid out. And I'm just spazzing out.
And this kid's whole career.
And like, I forgot that there was like, it's probably an offensive term, but there was like pole huggers. It was probably a worse word. But it's when you grab the pole behind you at the arcade to like steady yourself. And so he's just doing that the whole time, and his legs are just flopping up like a puppet, like a, you know, like it's a nutcrack marionette shit, you know. And it was just like one of my fondest video game memories. Just like literally getting a C+, and whatever the grading scale is.
And like that you know, that's an interesting genre in this discussion of like the DDRs and the various rhythm games and stuff that just like repurpose music that already exists, right, and turn it into an interactive product.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's valuable. That's not a thing that's saying anything, but it's something that like people can legitimately have fun with, you know? Your Beat Sabers and whatnot.
Yeah.
And on top of that, like
you need the money to buy those songs though.
Yeah, well, like, yeah, you do, right? You gotta buy the songs, but like even in Beat Saber, there's tons of mods and stuff like that, right? Like people put their own music into Beat Saber. Beat Saber has made people get into music and start making music so that they can put them into Beat Saber tracks, you know? That's valuable. People find value in these things and learn to express themselves creatively through them. Yeah. And that's the point of art. It is not simply, it's not that art has to like say a thing. It's not you have to get the right message from art. It's that you have to feel inspired in some way by that art.
Yeah, it's to me, it's about human connection.
Yeah.
It's a level that you could connect to an artist. Like, that's why I'm so obsessed with Souls Miyazaki and Kojima games. Because you see their life. You see things that they think in a certain sort of way. You feel some of their experiences without meeting them, right? Like, I learned recently that Miyazaki did not play a game until he was 29 and grew up poor, and that greatly contextualizes the way you look at Souls, because it's a game of pure nihilism, of player disempowerment. There's a reason all these game developers aren't doing that, because they did not have that experience growing up, most likely.
Yeah. And because you know, there's sort of rules when you play games. It's like okay, don't disempower your player. Yeah. You know, people play, like, it's this idea of like, oh, people play games for power fantasies and stuff. And that's kind of true, but like I mentioned Unsighted earlier, right? Unsighted, again, it's a top-down kind of a Souls-like Metroidvania, right? Very interesting game. What's really interesting about that game, beyond all of its mechanics and its, you know, its speedrunning and all of that, is the fact that every single character in that game is LGBTQ. And I don't mean just like they're canonically, you know, gay or bi or something. I mean like almost everyone you talk to is trans, like visibly, you know? Yeah. They're mostly robots, and you'll see robots with different parts from different genders just kind of put together. And it's not commented on. It's expected that everyone in that game is LGBTQ. And that game, it's a game designed to play how you want. And you get your weapons and you level up and everything. It is a power fantasy for that community, right? To feel powerful, but at the same time, in Unsighted, everyone in that game is on a timer. The longer you take, the less time they have, right? There's always a clock ticking down, and people will start to leave your game when they run out of time. You will start to lose NPCs, important people, right? You could run out of people in your world if you take too long to do it. And it's this sad commentary on like the state of the world that LGBTQ people feel now, you know, that like literally the world is closing in around them, you know, like as visible as they are, more and more people seem to be disappearing, you know? Yeah. The world wants you gone. Don't take that out of context, you know? Yeah. That's the way people feel about that. But at the same time, they've put those feelings into a power fantasy where you do have control. There are things you can do. You can write the world. And Unsighted, aside from being just a really fun game to play, is also a game that makes you think about the people around you. It makes you think about the state of the world and the way that the game creators, the people who wanted this game to exist, what they wanted you to understand about their lives, about the things that were important to them. Unsighted is a phenomenal game, and it's nothing that we've seen in the AAA industry. We cannot see it in the AAA industry.
And you know what Skyrim makes me think about? Googling how many caves there are in the world.
I don't want to know that answer, because you know it's in the hundreds.
Yeah. Who has more caves, Skyrim or the planet? You know. Yeah, so we definitely got a little rambly at the end. But I think a lot of this is kind of about, not just what we're, you know, it started off talking about this, you know, update now and release later. I don't know why it's so hard for me to remember. Started off talking about that. But, you know, some of it is kind of like a commentary that we both feel about trying to look at games as art, right? And this relates to that. Art is supposed to make you feel something. And, you know, sometimes it's good to talk about what those things make you feel. The way games make you think. The games that actually have tangible impact, you know? There's many times I've heard people say, this video game changed my life. Albeit, it was a 12-year-old about Sonic Adventure 2. But that doesn't matter. There's certain things that do actually have these impact. And I just think that's something that people kind of forget about and lose sight of when they say, well, I played Skyrim for 200 hours and I had fun doing it, But what was memorable? What lasted? What impacted you? And not every game has to do this. It's not the point of every game. Sometimes it's fun to play a buggy mess with your friends. Sometimes it's fun to go see Venom with your friends. But this is a path that leads to those experiences not being as common. If AAA has his way and pushes out indie games, the most you're ever going to feel is crashing a car into a helicopter in Grand Theft Auto 29.
Yeah. And I think it's important to state, I don't think AAA is pushing out the indie scene. I think it's the exact opposite.
But they're trying to. They're just failing.
Sure, they don't want the indie scene to succeed because they're direct competitors, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, again, Devolver Digital was just valued at $1 billion, and they are dedicated to creating to publishing quality indie games. And if they stick with
that until the dark hands of capitalism wrap around their neck.
Devolver is just a publisher.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's the thing. They don't make games. Devolver's not putting out games. So as long as, it's not really Devolver's choice. As long as, like, Fine Brothers and all of them continue putting out interesting, artistic, evocative pieces, Devolver will continue publishing those. Right? So I do think the indie scene is pushing out the AAA industry. AAA is like, okay, yes, they'll, we'll get these huge consoles and stuff like that, and it's never going to go away. But they're like, okay, well, we need to start putting fucking NFTs in our game. We need to increase the cost of our games to $70 because our greed cannot be sated. And at some point, that is not going to fly anymore.
Yeah.
People will simply stop buying their shit, and those companies will start dropping off, Yeah.
And maybe Cyberpunk was kind of a turning of the tides because they actually had to refund the pre-orders, which no one has ever had to do before.
Yeah, Cyberpunk.
And so, that's the hypothetical limit, probably.
Yeah, Cyberpunk made Sony, another AAA company, take action.
Yeah.
Sony does not refund shit. They don't care if you like the game or if the game function. But Cyberpunk was so bad, the industry itself had to make a little statement.
Yeah.
And that's not nothing. So it's not all doom and gloom. I just think it's doom and gloom on the AAA side, But indie games, for all their flaws, are doing interesting things. And there are some AAA companies that are valuable. Kojima Productions, From Software, for whatever flaws they have, they're still putting Nintendo, right? Are still putting out quality finished products over and over again. So when I talk about this idea of like release now, update later, the reason I think it's so important is because that mentality says we don't care about the product we're putting out. As long as eventually it gets anywhere that's considered valuable, that's considered finished, or people stop caring, then it's good. As long as you buy it, that's all that matters. And that's what that mentality epitomizes.
And it just encourages people to not be critical of stuff.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, well, it will get good.
It will get good, right? Like, there's plenty of people that are like, actually, once Cyberpunk became playable, it was actually a fun game. And I'm like, I'll never know.
Yeah.
Like, one day, probably I'll play that game. And honestly, it seems average at best. Like
it never looked fun to me. It's just from its premise, they're just like, GTA, but steampunky in Miami Vice.
I've heard it,
and you're like, that sounds like GTA.
Yeah, well, I've heard it's more of like a more of a linear game anyway, right? Like less GTA and more just kind of a little bit open world. But yeah, I honestly don't know, right? That's not the point. The point is like, the game was so fucking unplayable, even though I didn't really care that much at release. I couldn't even play it. And at this point, I certainly don't care if I ever do. I probably will one day, but I really don't care if I don't.
Are people ever going to be doing retrospectives about fucking Cyberpunk?
Because the most interesting thing you can say about Cyberpunk is about its release.
Yeah.
Right? Because after like a month of people shitting on it, people just stopped talking about it.
Yeah.
Nobody gives a fuck about Cyberpunk
It's the worst thing that
anymore.
can happen.
Yeah, it's just forgotten. And like one day, you know, they're going to release their DLC or something, and maybe it'll revive interest in the game or something. But the point is, like, that game had no heart. I'm sure a lot of people put their hearts into it, tried to make something valuable, but because it wasn't released by a company that cared about their product, the product that we got had its heart ripped out.
Yeah, I'm gonna go Google real quick. Cyberpunk employees' heart exploded from crunch time. See if that reels any results.
Yeah, let's find out how many people died in making Cyberpunk. Ooh, that's dark. Anyway.
Hey, remember when you said, like, eventually it's gonna get good?
No?
No, so earlier saying, you didn't say that about the game, but you said that was kind of, that's, okay, eventually it'll get good. We can forgive its things and update later. Seamless transition into next month. We're talking about Dark Souls. Get good. I don't know if you want to keep that one.
So what Joey is failing to say. We've decided...
You just kept talking. Like, I had it. I was ready. You said get good, and I'm like, I'm gonna hit and jam it. And then like 3.5 minutes passed, and I was like, it's
time to jam. Get in there and jam. That's the...
Space Jam?
Yeah, Space Jam, right? That's how it goes?
I think I have a copy of Shaq Fu. You want to do that?
Fuck yeah, I want to do Shaq Fu.
Yeah, for the cast or just for funsies?
I don't know. There's definitely no playing Shaq Fu for funsies.
That's nothing to do with Space Jam. They're just both basketball players.
He's not even in space.
Yeah, like... fuck off, me.
Didn't question it for a second either.
I do own Shaq Fu,
though. So that's the end of our discussion on the state of the industry. Kind of our brains where they're at. Boy, I didn't say that well. So the place our brains are at as far as what games are, what they should be, what we want to see from them. We don't want to limit what games can be. I never want to do that. I don't want to say that like you can't do online only games or anything. I don't think necessarily that like Fortnite is bad. I think its business model is bad. But Fortnite itself is a valuable entry into the gamosphere, but also into like the genre of battle royale and stuff. It changed the way we understand what games can be and how people can interact. Fortnite's valuable. I don't want to limit what games can be. I want to limit I want people that make games to care about their games.
Well, what I would say is, I don't think it's has anything to do with limiting for me personally. It's the model that looks at games like products and not works of art will become homogenized.
Yeah.
We've seen it in movies. That's why I keep saying it. And we're seeing it in games. Now, movies don't have the indie scene that games do. Good job, Steam. Probably.
Yeah.
You know.
Steam has a lot of problems, but at the same time.
But yeah, I don't think I don't think the indie game market would be thriving without it.
No, like Steam has been the single biggest driving factor of the indie market in general.
Yeah. Super, super important. But I don't want to, say, oh, what new games are out? And I just can't find the sort of thing I'm looking for. Yeah. Right? And, there's a lot of types of genres of games. But, I get that it's an older genre, but, it's harder and harder to find good turn-based RPGs. It's harder and harder to find Metroidvanias in the non-indie sphere. These genres are shrinking as the most popular genres are oversaturating the market. There's going to be 100 battle royales. That's not necessarily bad, but I would also like 100 turn-based RPGs and 100 Metroidvanias and all those sorts of things.
Yeah. But at the same time, we do get
or
the
100 new genre.
For these genres that are sort of disappearing, we do get the occasional gem that comes out. We've got the Octopath Travelers and whatnot that do show up and do try to make a splash in the scene. Even though Octopath Traveler isn't like the best game, boy, it's like they showed a demo for their next game, which they've just called Triangle Strategy so far.
Yeah, what if Octopath Traveler is Fire Emblem? So that's for me.
Yeah, exactly.
It's for me, Joey. The person who wants that the most.
Exactly. But that game, I played Triangle Strategy. That game fucks.
Yeah.
That game fucks hard. And I'm so excited for them to continue.
And, to just kind of lightly insert my biases here, that's why I like fucking Japanese companies. They're more willing to do this weird shit We get more Monster Hunters and Dark Souls and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Whereas these Western companies that I would argue are more tied up in the cold hard grip of capitalism.
Yeah.
We get more games that seem the exact same.
Yeah. So essentially, you know, we are looking towards the indie scene to sort of revive games, but that does seem to be what's going on. Like AAA seems to be on its way out in a lot of ways.
That's preposterous.
Well, it'll never disappear, but like a lot of these companies are not going to exist in 10, 20 years, right? Like
maybe.
I don't really think Ubisoft is going to survive in honestly the next 20 years. I don't think so.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Right?
We'll
like,
see.
Yeah.
I'm pessimistic about people with a lot of money losing that money.
Yeah.
Based on generational.
But again,
bullshit.
Ubisoft is one of the smallest AAAs, you know? So like maybe one day it just won't exist because they don't really put out good products and nobody really gives a shit about Assassin's Creed and Far Cry's anymore. They're putting their new NFTs. They're putting their new NFTs into their what is it? Tom Clancy. Is it Tom Clancy? Yeah, Tom Clancy Breakpoint. Like a game that everyone already hates. So they're just testing their shit on a game that people already hate, just in case they hate it more.
Yeah.
Like, they don't know what the fuck they're doing. They're desperate to make money. Right? They just wish they could make FIFA. So I think the industry...
Far Cry 6 sales, typing noises.
I don't want to talk about Far Cry 6. Honestly, I don't think it... I think it did fine, but I've heard nobody talk about Far Cry 6.
Yeah.
But my point is, like, I think despite all the doom and gloom we've said, the future of the industry is not as bleak as it could be. I do think I have concerns about, digitalization, all that, but I've already voiced those. So
yeah, I certainly think it's not as bleak as movies are, as I keep alluding to.
Fuck, man. But yeah, like somehow the only thing more homogenized than games is fucking movies. But that's gonna end our discussion on this particular topic. What we want to do moving forward.
I had that seamless transition to Dark Souls, and he just kind of
kept talking. I know.
Yeah.
So what Joey failed to say earlier was
succeeded perfectly.
Was that for the next mini moons, we will be doing every Dark Souls game, every Soulsborne.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes.
all the Dark Souls, Bloodborne, and theoretically Sekiro, if either of us can beat the game.
You've beaten it before. I haven't.
I've beaten it, but like not in the way that I beat Dark Souls games.
To be fair, I trained a lot and I got good, and
Yeah.
I feel pretty strong at Souls games.
You've been studying the blade.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like Sekiro, there's multiple bosses I never fought because I was like, that's too hard.
I'm better at pairing than Ross. I said it.
It's very true. So hopefully that works out. But yeah, for the next mini moons, we're gonna be covering Dark Souls and maybe Final Fantasy X because I believe.
Yeah, I wanted that for our year anniversary.
Yeah, I believe on our anniversary, the anniversary of the podcast, I am cursed to play a Final Fantasy game for the rest of the time. So, yeah, look forward to.
I like it.
Look forward to what we're calling the Souls block.
Yeah, what and I would say about Dark Souls, and I might reiterate some of this on the cast is, it's kind of the influence of her name, Boss Door, right?
Oh,
like Souls didn't make me fall in love with gaming, but man, Souls helped me come back to gaming. You know?
That's fair.
And I kind of left disillusioned, like, right when the PS3 and stuff came out. I was kind of not liking where games were going. And I'm pretty bummed I wasn't there for the beginning of Dark Souls. And, I really think it did the job. It did the industry a lot of good. And there's really, really a lot to unpack with Souls.
Yeah.
It's to me the most genre-defining game of the last 15 years.
Yeah. And a lot of people will say, like, oh, Souls-like isn't a genre. But it is.
Yeah, like, what are you talking about?
Of course it is.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, sure, it doesn't have, like, there's not, like, you can't point to everything. There's not, like, a checklist that says, oh, this is a Souls-like.
One thing I think is really illuminating, in an interview, they were talking to Miyazaki, creator of Souls. What do you think about all these people, like, copying the Dark Souls model? And he's like, yeah, we're all influenced by Zelda, I guess, so it's kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
And, like, that's exactly how, like, he wasn't doing it on purpose, but, like, yeah, that's how fucking influential Dark Souls is you can be like, yeah, it's like the Zelda of, post-2010.
Yeah, exactly.
That's preposterous to think about in a lot of ways.
Exactly. Like, what other games have made genres?
Yeah, off air we were talking about Gears of War and cover-based shooters, and it's like, That should be like a day one concept we come up with as shooters. You know, it's totally different than the Souls model. That is just non-intuitive.
Yeah. So we're really excited. We've been playing every Souls game, and oh boy, those are going to be good casts. So
broke my brain.
Yeah. So if you've gotten this far, and you enjoyed what we said, it's going to be a good 5 or 6 months. So thanks for listening. If you liked what you heard, add us at bossdoor4.
If you didn't like what you heard, add us at bossdoor4.
Yeah, I don't give a fuck if you liked it or not. Just engage.
Yeah, just engage.
I do want to say, if you do listen to our podcast, thank you. You know?
Yeah.
We get literally no interaction, so I don't know who listens to us. I know a lot of people download it, but if you don't interact with us, like, just thank you for listening. It means a lot. We do this because we love it, not because we don't need engagement. We're not asking for your money. We're just asking for some of your time, and I hope we made you think about stuff. So do at me though.
Yeah.
At bossdoor4. I can't stress it enough. Engage.
Yeah, just
get
yourself banned, man. Like,
yeah, just do it.
Come at him.
Be my first band.
I'm riding in the front seat of a train car, hurtling towards the heavens, and I'm gonna catch you alone.
And then, yeah, if you wanna email us, it's bossdoorpodcast@gmail.com. And we do have a YouTube channel, Bossdoor on YouTube. It will be linked in the description of this podcast, wherever you're seeing the podcast. I do try to play games and put gameplay footage up on there. I've not been super successful. Time is a problem.
Outro song!
When you gotta fight gods, but none of them live up to it, then all of them give up. Does that make you feel better? When you gotta fight gods, but none of them meet your eye line, does that make you feel fine, or are you disappointed? You know, when you look up to